Good evening, everyone. Today is Wednesday, April 27th, 2022, and this is a meeting of the Gloucester School Committee. Consistent with Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, this meeting will be conducted by remote participation. The public may not physically attend this meeting, but every effort will be made to allow the public to view and to listen to the meeting in real time and participate when necessary. If you are calling in on a phone, you can press *9 to request to speak. If you are watching on a computer or device, there is a raise hand button that you can tap or press to request to speak. Please use either of these options during oral communications to be recognized to speak. I want to mention the mission of Gloucester Public Schools is for all students to be successful, engaged, lifelong learners. And I ask that you join me with the salute to the flag.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I just want to mention before we begin the next item, which is oral communications, that at our last meeting, due to an administrative error, the agenda for the April 13th, 2022 meeting did not include all of the items that were discussed, specifically in East Gloucester / Veterans Memorial Building Project update and the superintendent's report, which was an update on COVID-19. These items will be covered, highlighted again this evening so that it is in this meeting's record, but the recording is available from last meeting and the presentation in its entirety is in the packets. That being said, we now move on to oral communications. If there is anybody in attendance that would like to speak, please raise your hand and we will unmute you. Okay. We have Erin McKay who would like to speak.
Hi, good evening. Thank you, Kathy. This is Erin McKay. I have two students at Gloucester High School, a child at East Gloucester School and another school out of district who will likely go to Gloucester High in a few years. I'm calling this evening because I saw on the agenda that there's a discussion of facilities this evening, and I wanted to express my support for the Gloucester Hockey High School program and their use of the facilities, specifically the rink. I have a JV, this year I had a JV player, he's a 10th grader. And because of limited ice time allotted to the Gloucester High School hockey program, Liam over 10 weeks had 18 practices totaling 780 minutes. Sorry, I had to pull over on the side of the road from a lacrosse game at Masco. 12 of those 18 practices were only 35 minutes long. So to give you a little comparison, my mite player, and mites are 8 years old, they had in that same 10-week period for Cape Ann Youth Hockey, the mites had 26 practices totaling 1,300 minutes compared to the 780 minutes for JV. And then my Pee-wee player, who's 11, had 34 practices totaling 1,700 minutes. So my 11-year-old had more than almost 1,000 minutes more than my 10th grader. It is my understanding that the hockey program has requested on more than one occasion that the rink be reserved from 2:45 to 6 o'clock, Monday through Friday, for high school hockey, girls, boys, varsity, JV, especially since the rink was dedicated to the use of our students in our community, above and beyond renting it to outside programs. So even as a parent of Cape Ann Youth Hockey who will have kids who will practice through Cape Ann Youth Hockey, I'm asking that it be considered to allot more time to our JV players. What does this do? It gives us a solid foundation so we can continue to go far in the playoffs as we did this year. It's hard to get anything done in 35 minutes of practice. The mission of Gloucester School Sports says that the goal is to build individual talent and team formation. And that lacked for our 10th grader this year. They barely were on the ice and then they were getting off for the Zamboni. No time has been more indicative than this time of COVID to see the value of high school sports. When it was Omicron and we weren't letting our kids socialize, they got to see their friends at sports. Even when it's not a pandemic, we value these opportunities of after school enrichment and sports. Our kids are not on video games as much. They're getting their homework done. So if they're at the rink once a week for 35 minutes, it really takes away all of those opportunities that we value and that we need for our kids who play these sports. So I ask that when you look at facilities, there be a consideration of giving the Gloucester High School hockey program, both boys and girls, varsity and JV, 2:45 to 6 o'clock Monday through Friday. Thank you.
Thanks, Erin. Hold on one second. I think Melissa wants to say something.
So I'm just going to ask the committee, based on the testimony that was just provided to us, that we refer this to be enough for a discussion of ice time in general, because that's a discussion we haven't had in a while because of the lack of time over the past couple of years. So I'm going to request that this get referred to be enough for a discussion about time used for ice for our school sports.
Okay. Without objection?
Yeah.
Okay, Erin, it'll be referred to our Building and Finance Subcommittee so we can get some more information.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have CR who would like to speak.
Hello,
Hi, can you name and address for the record, please?
Catherine Ryan and 17 High Rock. And I have a couple questions. I did have one of them ready the night that you guys went into a session for a long time. And then when we came back, the YMCA made a presentation and I was on the entire time. So one of them is a little older, but anyhow, the first one is, how do the ZBA considerations related to density and the upcoming Todd overlay affect the new vets and EGS consolidation capacity for enrollment? And throughout the school process, people wondered about the new schools planning to nearly the precise enrollment of those two schools combined with not a lot of wiggle room. So what does that mean if and when enrollment increases? That's my first question. My second question is in a couple points. Back in June 2020, after George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis, Gloucester school officials sent a press release to the local paper about a new Gloucester High School racial equity inclusion team. When I checked last spring, 2021, I was told that the high school diversity committee was meeting with the promise of unveiling their results beyond the committee to parents, the district, to the whole community. I'm wondering about that. I'm wondering about new committee members. Have you been filled in on the racist and civil rights abuses that the school was called out on to address by the estate, the Attorney General? Since then, similar examples have happened in Danvers and Quincy and across the state have come to light in various accountabilities. How is our district, this district, strategically recruiting diverse candidates and addressing supportive environments? To date, none of you that I've seen or the district has shared an excellent article that was in the GHS Gillnetter by Darcy Muller. And you guys have shared other articles by students. I strongly encourage sharing that one. And as the final part with this second question is, what outreach has happened to address the major oversight of the new building committee and planning department and other leadership bodies like the school committee, still lacking diverse representation and neighborhood stakeholder representation, robust. Even the new attendance tracking that you ordered as a consultant group, the makeup of that group is not addressing, any target needs of what's been identified by the state that O'Malley and the high school need to work on, and it's having a significant impact. The third question is, has the work for the GHS and O'Malley lobby upgrade, which was also security enhancements related to first-person shooter and safety, put in as a capital improvement budget item, awarded as a separate project for Doran Whittier, estimated at about $2 million. Has that been completed? Before the work begun, the PO, the contract included IT and security upgrades. Did those IT upgrades happen? And what is the status of that completion? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, all right, I don't see any other hands raised. We will move on to recognitions, and I might start.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I can show a couple while you're doing that. I can show a
Okay.
couple of slides.
So there was the opening of the sculpting itself at the Keegan Museum this weekend. And the museum worked with 8th graders from Gloucester, Rockport, and Manchester, Essex. And they created sculptures based upon an inspiration by Walker Hancock, who had done some project on baseball or basketball figures. So I went on Saturday. I highly recommend. It was really quite interesting what people chose to do for themselves, you know, to kind of portray themselves. We have baseball players and kids sunbathing and all sorts of kind of cool things. So I highly recommend checking it out. Of course, the museum is always beautiful, and this exhibit is put up very professionally on the 3rd floor. So hopefully some people have just that have participated in that as well. It's kind of fun.
Sorry, I went as well on at the opening last Saturday. And as you can see on some of these, students were asked to come up with an activity of their interest, sporting or otherwise, and a number of them had it's just a wide range of them. Some had quite a bit of emotion and feeling that you can see on this, like one on the left. So the other one was great. It was I think wrestling, which is a great representation of a very popular sport, and then a very classic one in terms of baseball. And then here we have a dancer, I believe, and then also someone who's doing a favorite pastime of reading. But just a very diverse representation of interests and approaches. Very impressive. Seal. A seal. Cool. Okay. Recognition. I'd like to recognize Tyler Weed, Elijah Saroof, and Seamus Buckley and Barrett Buckley. They recently competed in the M3 Challenge, which is a mathematical modeling challenge for high school students in the US, England, and Wales. It was a virtual challenge. They earned honorable mention and a scholarship of $1,000. They were among 37 teams out of 612 teams, so the top 6% to win an award with a scholarship prize. This year's challenge question was titled Remote Work, Fad or Future. Teams downloaded the problem and have had 14 hours to develop mathematical models to address the questions and to write a paper justifying their assumptions, explaining their reasoning, reporting their solutions, and reflecting on their process and results. So congratulations to Tyler, Elijah, Seamus, and Barrett for a job well done. And also thank you to Deb Fonts for her support of the team and our science department. Science and math, sorry. So great.
Next we have our Gloucester High School Student Advisory Council. We have Jenna Smith with us again. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me again. All right, I have a lot to tell you guys. So, first thing, I saw a lot of you guys at the NHS induction that took place on March 24th. That was very successful. Last year, when my grade was inducted, we weren't able to have the full ceremony. It was really, we made the best of what we had, but we didn't have the candles. We didn't have as many speakers, but this year it was really successful. It was great. No students dropped their candles, so the auditorium was not burnt down. So that was successful. This, like the inductees from last year from my grade, our community and tutoring hours were turned in on Monday. So we're still members of NHS, but hopefully, I think every single person, I hope, has completed and turned in their hours. The elections for next year's NHS officers are taking place tomorrow, which is really exciting because we get to see the new president, president, vice president, secretary, and historian, I believe, are the 4 officers. So those are going to get elected tomorrow. Student council signups for next year have started. Elections are going to be soon. Right now, all the sign up forms are just getting out there. People are signing up. It's good, getting started early. So then we have a bunch of senior stuff coming up, which I'm particularly amped about. The senior countdown is down to 22 days, which is unbelievable because 22 days from now, I'm out of here. That's terrifying. I'm not ready to go into the real world. I can't even think about that. But tomorrow night is a senior banquet at the cruise port. Miss Clancy, I really hope to see you there. We can boogie all night. Can't wait. Prom tickets are being sold. Prom is on June 3rd in Georgetown at the Black Swan. The voting from prom court is going to start soon. I believe that the voting is a mixture of both like staff and teachers and students, which is really exciting. So if you guys know any staff members, let them know to vote me for prom court, because who doesn't want to be on prom court? May 27th is my last day of school. On that day, we're having a picnic, which is like run by the juniors for the seniors, and that's going to be at stage 4. It's being catered by the Causeway, I believe. We're going to have karaoke, maybe a slip and slide. It's going to be a really fun day. So that's what our last day is going to look like. On that day, we're also getting our yearbooks, and as part of the yearbook staff, they look really good. I cannot wait for them to come in and like everyone gets to sign it. It's going to be so fun. Finally, spring sports are off to a really good start. I actually just got back from my track meet in Saugus, and let me tell you, it was probably one of the coldest meets I've ever been to. So it's kind of miserable. But overall, spring sports are off to a really good start. Most teams have a winning record right now, which is awesome. And that's all I have for you. Any
Awesome.
questions?
Does anybody have any questions? So Jenna, will we see you for 2 more meetings, hopefully?
I hope so. I'm going to try and get here for the last 2.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you guys for
Have a good
having
night.
me again.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, next item is the consent agenda. Does anyone have any items they would like to remove from the consent agenda?
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We need a roll call vote. Maybe I'll call it.
I serve at your direction.
Okay, I'll call it. It won't be alphabetical, it'll be visual. Mayor Verga,
Yes.
Laura Weason,
Yes.
Bill Melvin,
Yes.
Melissa Prince, yes. Steve Vigneault,
Yes.
Kathy Clancy, yes. Okay. Passes unanimously. Okay. Next, so we're moving on to deliberations on educational issues. Our first item up is the report for the Gloucester Fishermen's Athletic Association, and I think it's been many years that we've actually had someone come speak to us from GFAA. So we're glad to have you, Kristen Michelle, who is the president. Yes. So yeah, and along with her we have Lisa Nigello and her husband. So
Thank you.
Tell us cool stuff going on.
Sure.
Started.
That'd be great. Thank you for having me here, and we are going to share our new mission for the Gloucester Fishermen Athletic Association. We recently updated it this year. The mission of the GFAA is, well, there we go. The Gloucester Fishermen Athletic Association is a nonprofit 501c3 community-based organization founded to support Gloucester student athletes. The GFAA is dedicated to the principle that all students in the Gloucester school system should be able to participate in the sport of their choice, regardless of financial circumstances. The GFAA is also committed to ensuring that those student athletes play and practice on safe and maintained facilities and are equipped with the technology and equipment necessary to ensure competitive success. A little bit about what we have done over the past 15 years. Most notably, the renewal of Newell Stadium is probably what you're most familiar with. That was a great collaboration between the city and a number of community stakeholders. But in addition to that, over the past 15 years, we've invested over $2 million in Gloucester's athletic programs. We have also enabled students to participate in athletics regardless of their ability to pay. And we have provided scholarships to students over $200,000. The way that works, and I know a lot of people probably wonder, we meet with the athletic director every month, and he reviews it with us by season. So if there are students that haven't been able to pay in that season, he'll tell us how many and we'll just write a check. So that's how they, we never know who the students are. It's always vetted through him and through his staff. So that's how we determine how the scholarships are determined. We also have, and this is probably something a lot of people don't know, is an award for volunteers, and we recognize their extraordinary contributions. And we have a few, we haven't done it in a while. Pandemic didn't help that, but past recipients of the Avis Murray Award are Avis Murray herself, Austin Connors, Jim Munn, and Lisa Olsek. So you should be seeing more about that probably within the next year for our next recipient. So other things that we've done during the pandemic, we provided face coverings for all coaches. We partnered with Cape Ann Live and helped fund their volunteer effort to bring sports to the community through their filming. And we invested in camera systems that are located at the Fieldhouse, Talbot Rink, and Newell Stadium to live stream events. And they, I know that Cape Ann Live does great work, but the cameras allow for streaming for all the sub-varsity sports. So you can see anything that's going on in any of those venues. And there is a subscription, but it allows anyone in the country to watch. So that's been great as well. Most recently, we've collaborated with Amy Cam on the mental health and wellness community event. And we are committed to the well-being of our students. And we're looking forward to the next event in the fall. And hopefully we're able to continue that a couple times a year. And that partnership is really important. Last month we pledged $4,000 to the baseball team for refurbishment of their batting shell. We invested $14,000 in a track timing system, state of the art. So that was something recent. We also contributed $10,000 to a wrestling mat, and that program's really taking off. They had 6 athletes go to the championships this year, and that's tremendous for a relatively new sport in our schools. We also contribute to field improvements outside in the community, so for Little League and softball. And then we contributed $10,000 to the Young Legends Rink Development Program, and it's progressing nicely. If you've seen their photos, they paved this week, so that's coming along. So what's next for us? We did take a pause during the pandemic, and actually we haven't fundraised and done a campaign since 2016. So all the things that we've done were with funds that we had available, but we have a new campaign coming up. And we're looking to rehab the fitness center at DHS. If anyone's been in there and you can kind of see some of the pictures, it's time. So we wanted to do this in 2019. We had a very important member of our community, our school community, pass away. And if you knew Greg Swinson, he was a teacher at O'Malley, and he was in that gym every day. He mentored so many students and then became friend to many as an adult. And we would love to do this work in his memory. So we have a campaign, thanks Bill for helping us stuff envelopes last night, going out, and we will be also working with Lisa and Doug in the tennis court project. And if you want to learn more about the GFAA, our website's being updated, but we're also on Facebook, and you'll be able to see our projects there as well. So we are excited to introduce Lisa Novello and Doug Kerr. They came to us with an incredible project, and it wasn't hard to say yes. We're providing them some logistical support. We are going to be the financial fiduciary for some of their donations. And we're very excited for you to see the next part and for what their class of 1988 is doing for this project. And I hope more classes come together to support some of our efforts as well. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, I've already got that up. Thanks so much, Ben. So I'm Lisa Novello, and I know most of you, but there are a couple of new faces for me. So I'm a very proud graduate of Gloucester High School from the class of 1988. I live in Magnolia. I returned to Gloucester after going off to Wellesley College, living on the West Coast, went to law school at UCLA, came back to practice in Boston. But I returned to Gloucester right before our first son was born. Max is a junior at Gloucester High School and a three-sport athlete. He's a big runner. He'll be captain of all of the running teams next year. My younger son, Anders, who is the fifth from the left up there, he grew about 6 inches since this picture was taken, but he plays soccer, basketball, and tennis. And we came back because where else would anybody want to raise their kids and send them to school but Gloucester? I'm currently a biotech executive. I'm with Surface Oncology, which is an immuno-oncology company in Kendall Square, Cambridge, and super happy to have the opportunity to talk to you about this project that Doug and I are really excited about. I'll let you introduce yourself.
So I'm Doug Kerr, I'm Lisa's husband. I'm a neuroscientist. I'm not a Gloucester native. I've only been here for about 15 years, but I absolutely love it. I'm a tennis player. I'm dressed the part because I am an assistant coach on the tennis team. We're having a blast. We're 5-0 already this year. And it's just really fun to be a part of this team and to see these kids grow. And so this project is really near and dear to our hearts.
And so I'll pause it for a minute on, well, that slide, we're here because of those kids, right? So Anders had never played tennis before last year. And then he decided that he and 5 of his freshman friends would come out for tennis. That's how Doug became an assistant coach. He's like, well, Derek's gonna need help teaching all these kids to play tennis, let alone coaching them through a season. And they had such a great time, even in those early days. And the spirit on this team is really, it's incredible, it's infectious for everybody who engages with the program. And when I went to the first match and I saw the fancy bus from Swampscott pull up and the kids get out in their tennis whites, I not only went out and bought white shorts for the whole team because they were all different colors the first day, but I really tuned in when they had to do they do really cool introductions of the varsity players. And they have to do a whole segment on what is the call when the ball hits the crack in the court with the grass. So that's considered to be a let. And at each match at Gloucester High School, you have to give this whole instruction to all of the players who call their own shots, right? So they call their own lines. And I usually witness at least a dozen calls impacted by the courts and the crack. So I was like, something must be done. Now, Mike, who has arrived, my partner in crime, had been thinking about this for some time, as had the coaching staff. So we just started talking about it last summer and things really took off. So we're here for these kids and the girls team as well. We're here for the whole community, really. If you want to go to the next slide, because tennis
Just
works.
while you're on that, Seamus, Tyler, and Elijah, who were called out because of their math award, are on the team.
Yes.
So
It's a very academic group. They can have science and math tutoring on the sidelines if they wish it. So that works well, it works very well. But, I really want to emphasize how important these courts are for the entire Gloucester community. My dad's been playing there for 50 years, right? This is a resource for the school, for the kids, for the youth, for the entire community. And so when we started talking about this, we were anchored around this idea that the student athletes should be really proud of these courts and will have a better experience with Gloucester High School tennis. Support the growing program. Both the girls and boys teams are growing, they're strong, they're performing really well. It also, if you come into this past beautiful Newell Stadium, new softball field. Field house is in great shape now. That basketball court is awesome. You swing around to the tennis courts and you're in like a wasteland, right? And people go by it all the time, not just to play tennis, because that's how you get to the public landing, which is one of the busiest public landings around, I'm told. So it really would signal a vibrant Gloucester to have these courts and the surrounding area redone. And of course, it supports tennis in the community, and a lot of different activities you can imagine. Tennis lessons, different types of camps. People of all ages and abilities will use these courts. So we got really excited about that project. Next slide. As I was talking about it, in addition to Doug and Mike, who are not Gloucester class of '88, everybody else I was talking to was from the Gloucester High School class of '88. They're basically running the tennis program. Derek Geary, boys coach, Gap Saputo, head coach of the girls team. Phil Muller, my neighbor and classmate, is one of the other assistant coaches. And Craig Herman, who many of you know, is an architect, and he's kind of been advising us on some design matters. So we have this really amazing group of the class of '88 that's kind of come together to push this project forward, and we're on track to get it done starting after this tennis season. So we're super excited about that. This slide, I really want to focus on the crack and the tennis ball, because that is all over the court. It's pretty impressive. We call Mike's team and we say, hey guys, the grass is a little too long. Can you come and weed whack before the game? So really important. There's the budget. Mike is nailing down some details, has been a terrific partner to us throughout this effort. And because of his incredible experience with the Avis Murray courts on the Boulevard, has a great playbook, knows the vendors, knows how to get this project done. So that's our estimated budget, and we're in good shape with about 300,000 already in hand and going to the GFAA tomorrow. I'm going to Tim's house. We have additional pledges already, including the GFAA's $10,000 pledge, which is intended to spark the class of 1988 giving. We're kind of doing a soft launch on the community campaign right now to the class of '88 and the tennis families. After this meeting, we'll open it up to the larger community, and I'm partnering with Avis and JJ Bell and Dick Wilson to kind of talk with local businesses. So we're in that phase, but we've got a great head of steam and already have enough funds committed such that we'll be able to get it to the city, get the contract signed, and get this project rolling. We don't have to go through this one. I know we're sort of pressed for time, but lots of stakeholders have already been consulted. I spoke with Val Gilman this morning. We are going to be speaking with the city council. I now know the process for the next steps in terms of the, how the money flows. So we're in terrific shape with that. Spring of 2023, which is the class of 1988's 35th reunion year. I don't know how that's possible, but that will be the debut season for the tennis teams on the new courts. Next slide. These are more administrative matters we'll be discussing with the city council in terms of naming the courts, honoring Stephen B. Ross, to whom the courts were dedicated back in, I believe it was 1998, so if I remember correctly. We'll be consulting with the Ross family as part of this process. That's important to all of us. Some kind of guidance about the use of the courts and the management of the courts through Brian LaFata's team, the athletic director. You want to take this one?
Well, I
Tennis
mean,
player, Doug?
I think you said it, but it's just so exciting to see the interest in the community in tennis. I can imagine camps. I can imagine people of all ages and abilities. When I was a kid between college years, I did this thing called College for Kids. I can imagine tennis, swimming, GMGI, a really cool, vibrant community for kids in the summer, some tournaments, and I just think it's really exciting. Tennis is such a lifelong game that it's good for everybody.
Right, well, schematic. The next slide, I think, is just a fun picture of the girls' team. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
When was it last resurfaced?
The courts were built, Avis believes, in 1955. They were only significantly repaired one time, and we believe that's around the time they put in the light posts. And that at that time, the light posts were not anchored deeply enough in the ground beneath the courts such that the wind on the lamppost caused even more buckling and cracks to occur.
Yeah.
So it's a project that is long overdue.
It's amazing.
All right. And the next slide has a picture of the project team. There we are, class of '88. We're gonna put that in our letter to the class because everyone's like, people want to see what you look like now. So that'll be there, another crack. And thank you for your time.
I do know Coach Geary, it's very much a welcoming sport for
Yeah.
for people to try it for the first time.
Yeah, that's one of the amazing things about this team. You have a whole range of players. You have some, you have, the way tennis works, you've got a small group of varsity players. Is it 7 play varsity? So 3 singles, 2 doubles each match. Then you got JV and they play doubles. And you have such a range. Some people are beginners, some people are expert, but they all support one another and have this incredible culture. It's really a fun thing to observe.
Mayor Berger has his hand up.
Yes, I don't have a comment. I just wanted to say, just give a little background. First of all, the GFAA, because I'm proud to be one of the founders of it. And back in around 2006, those were the good old days when we had to make a lot of cuts on the school committee. And one of the things we had to do, very reluctantly, and I can tell you it wasn't popular, was to start having athletic fees. And the hope when we made that decision was, and we said it at school committee meetings, maybe some nonprofit will start up to take care of this. And unfortunately it didn't happen, but Jonathan Pope and I sort of got the ball rolling, and then we got Dick Wilson involved, and then the ball just started rolling really fast because everybody here knows Dick Wilson, knows what he can do. And then Jim McKenna, just to give a little credit, he's the one who helped us with the 501c3 documentation. So I'm really glad to see that 15 years later, it's still going strong. And Kristen, I can't see you very well because I just see the one little block with the whole room, but I'm glad to see it survives. And I did meet with Doug and Lisa, I guess it was early in April. I didn't see the exact date, but this sounded like the perfect candidate for what we've done in the past with the partnership that made the renewal of Newell a reality, this public-private partnership. Because as I said to them, if they had come to me and said, we need $500,000 to fix the tennis courts, that just was not in the cards for the city to say, well, let's do that. But this is a way it can happen, with the full support of the city and the public going forward. And I'm not a tennis player myself. I don't have the knees for it, but I'm very excited to see this project through, and the city's ready to help in any way we can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kristen, first of all, thank you very much for the GFA's ongoing support of our athletes, our school, the community. I may be the last one to find out about these things, but just in the sense that, or you need a better week should help you work with you to make sure that the whole community knows about how much you do for our schools and our students. Because I have a feeling, although many people are in the know, it may be a very well kept secret.
I think it might be.
Yeah. So, but would love to help with that because it's such you support us in so many ways. And Lisa and Doug, great to meet you. And really, thank you for knowing the team so well and knowing the benefits so well, not only for the student athletes, but also for the community. Thank you for your leadership on this. It's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, thank you.
I appreciate it.
Wow. Awesome. Exciting. Really excited. Well, thank you for being here. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy lives and joining us here.
Thanks so much.
Thank
You're always welcome to stay and.
We will leave you to it.
Keep staying. Thanks, Bill.
It's a pleasure.
Okay, the next order of business is facilities planning, and we have Mike Dale, the Department of Public Works Director, who has joined us. We appreciate all that your parts to us, and we're excited.
We'll be doing this together. Give me a moment here while I. Almost with you. Okay, so Mike and I are gonna give a presentation together, okay? We've done a lot of work together the past few months to figure out sort of just what the universe is of capital projects that are upcoming. And just want to go through some of this and we'll sort of tag team but ultimately both here to answer whatever questions the committee has. So we'll be going over these pieces, the summary of the planning process to date. Our ultimate goal of having a capital plan, a few highlights of the planned capital improvements, what we hope to do in terms of annual reporting, and then Mike should give us an update on the Beaman and Plum Cove modular repair project. So just a summary of the process so far. So Gary Frisch and I met with each principal, Director of Transportation and Director of Food Service. We identified our needs for capital improvements, furniture, and summer maintenance. Developed a comprehensive list of all of those, and then worked with Mike and Joe Lucido and vetted that with them. Obviously, they knew about many of those, had already working on many of those, but they also gave us a lot of really good information in terms of, shaping that, understanding timing, timelines, but also understanding where things were just unrealistic. I'll put it that way, which is all, of course, very, very helpful. Together, so we find, but from that back and forth, we also discussed funding process and how to do that with the city. We're together with the city on that. And then we finalized the list of capital projects for FY 20 through 26, which we shared with you. Sharing it today, obviously. Our goal essentially for the schools at least have a 5-year capital plan, capital facilities plan, and this is really together is, first of all, it's a living document. It's got to be revisited and revised annually together. It's the schools, Department of Public Works, the city administration, and we're doing that in order to ensure that we provide high quality facilities that support learning, student engagement, and high quality instruction. It allows us, and I say us, meaning the city, DPW, and the schools to work together to plan, prepare for, and fund capital improvements on a regular ongoing basis, and maintain our building infrastructure for the long term. As we have said, and I've said again and again, DPW has been doing a great job over the years Mike has been here and really upgraded our repair maintenance schedules and making sure that things get done on a time basis, but also really looking to maximize the lifespans. And having a regular capital planning process like this will help us do that even better and do it in a planful way. So a few important things. It's a living list. It's going to be updated annually by us working together, DPW and the schools. It'll be aligned with the budget process. In terms of just adjusting the plan, we'll have to be adjusted year to year based on either new projects that come up, timelines that can't be hit because everything, including the pandemic or supply chain, but also just in terms of where we're going to make progress and things, or not. The other thing the plan does, it allows us to get going on the on the projects that are in the outgoing years, outlying years, and doing the work we need to do now so they happen on schedule and on time, basically. And then the most important piece in terms of the planning is that we can, we're hoping to work together, have a capital appropriation each year that's developed based on this joint plan. So we're working with the city to do that over time, rather than every year coming to, to develop a request, which has worked very well, especially with Mike's leadership, but have an ongoing appropriation that we can essentially count on, rely on, and then plan on how that's about. But that's going to take some work together. Mike, anything you want to add on that in terms of just capital planning or the value of it, or just what you see works?
I think capital planning is a relatively simple exercise. It's the funding that's the most difficult piece of it. We can collaborate on a list of needs and wants, but oftentimes those needs and wants far outpace the funding stream that we have. So I think having a reasonable list and dedicated funding on a periodic base, whether it's annual or biannual, whatever it may be, it would be a good way to guarantee we get through most of these capital projects as certainly the priority ones. And again, hope we get to some of the wants, not just the needs.
So in terms of getting into some of the things that we're planning for, and you know, many of these are in the works, because these are some things we're hoping to get accomplished in FY '23, and you know many of these. And we refer to them complete replacement student lockers, a project that was begun a number of years ago. Refurbished bathroom, so that exterior painting of Plum Cove and Beaman, and they're repairing the modular buildings. Those are funded from a city council approved loan order that happened in December 2021, so a few months ago. Refurbishing bathrooms at the high school, that's something that Mike and DPW have really brought to our attention. I would say, I mean, the high school knows of the need, but that's something that they've been working on. And submitted a capital request to the city to do that this summer.
Which Mayor Berger has forwarded $500,000 to the city council Tuesday night.
That's all right. That's one of the worst things that happens. Mike was carrying some good news there.
Yeah, so we have
We're good. I can listen and clean at the same time.
so Mayor Berger forwarded a $500,000 authorization to spend out of the building maintenance stabilization fund. That went to council on Tuesday, referred out to budget and finance. And it's a relatively simple transfer. Great. And then we can start to pick away at some of these projects pretty soon.
That's great news. Thank you, Mike, for your work. Definitely. Pavement play area in front of the modulars, so something we've done a little bit of some pieces of over the past year. I shouldn't say we, DPW done some of the pieces of that over the past year for the patching. But talking to Mike, I think we can get that done after the modulars at even that project's completed. So it wouldn't make much sense to do it prior to. And some things that carpeting in common areas and pass card access at additional entrances here at the high school. Carpeting in common areas is the preschool. Those are things that on the more comprehensive list that you have as part of your packet, you see that there are some things that are jointly working together on or led by the city DPW, and some are in our ability with complete in terms of schools to fund and then also contract. In many of those cases where we're responsible for the funding, we still work with DPW in terms of their support and their help on specs, on working with on-call contractors or folks they know in the field, all the work. So they help us in that way as well. But we're responsible for doing the contract, finding the funding, and then execute, making sure the work is executed. The carpeting the common areas and the pass card are examples of two examples of they're in our house, in our bailiwick, but may be working with and have to collaborate with DPW. For example, on pass card entrances, we would do the work and get the work done and contract it, but it has to coordinate and integrate because DPW controls the electronic system of our access to our building. So that's another way we work together. Any questions on these ones for myself or for Mike?
So just two notes, you didn't mention the playgrounds, which are on here,
Oh, right.
the Plum Cove playgrounds. And just a question on the preschool carpeting. I could be wrong, but I don't think we've resolved the issue of the future of that building.
Oh, you're not wrong about that. No.
Okay,
Yeah.
so,
Yep.
so just wondering about investing in that building.
These are some areas in the administrative offices which are essentially torn up right now. So as you know, I've said before, we are hesitant to invest in, have anybody, the city invest in that building because it's a leased space. But in this example, we have to look into essentially repairing or maybe replacing these areas where it's really tripping hazard.
So it's a short-term
Yeah,
hazard.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, exactly. In terms of the playgrounds, so Gary's leading that project, working closely with PTO leaders and the principals and an engineer, and working through that, moving towards a process of bid documents ready. Those are on schedule. It may be extended because of timelines and availability of installers and just in the fall, but they're also very short-term installations, and the principals will be aware of that at this point. But we move forward, and we may have to allocate some additional dollars from ESSER on that, but that's part of what we're figuring out, the cost and scope. Sorry, any other questions on? Yeah.
Yeah, Mike, I don't think we've had the pleasure of meeting him Bill Nolan. We seem to know a lot of things. If the money is approved by the city, is the $500,000, is that for the high school refurbishing and O'Malley combined? It's dedicated to schools, so this is a request for school repairs. We doors, bathroom repairs, that'll suck up money pretty quickly.
Yeah.
We spent probably half that on O'Malley, this spring of 20. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 bathrooms done.
So then just same version of 23, again, some of the highlights. So we're working on window and door replacement, which is an MSBA project. That's in the feasibility phase at this point. And we're actually having a meeting tomorrow with our project manager and architect, next steps in mapping out the timeline. They shared with us a timeline. Perhaps give a further update at the BNet meetings that are coming up. But so that's in the beginning stage of the feasibility. The next step on that really would be a meeting presenting at the MSBA meeting in August. So that's what we're aiming to have feasibility phase done by before that. Repair modular buildings at Plum Cove. Mike will give us an update on that in a little bit. We're obviously new school and on schedule and on budget for opening. Refurbished auditoriums. This is a O'Malley in the high school. This is another example of DPW starting a process, and they're looking into some costs for for flooring and seating. But then we may be able to also expand the project through seeking private funding as well. So TPO helps us with the beginning of that in terms of getting the basics, essentials, and then we might go further. Other things are related to access. So lifts at the high school in Beaman. These are, and the work we'll be doing in FY23 to repair to accomplish these in FY25 is there on the right-hand side. Food service generations, the sound system, the cafeteria, the lifts. Those are things where we have to spec out in the upcoming year and also identify funding for in order to get them done in FY24. And then see a couple other pieces as well. But the value of having this plan is we know what work we need to do to start this year on the projects that may happen in 24, 25 in order that there's teed up to do that. As Mike said, it could have been more that of all that, the most important thing is identify the funding. You can't do identify the funding until you understand that until the project is mostly scoped out. And reporting, what we'll do is in the fall, report back like we did, I think, this past fall, perhaps last 2 falls actually, just on what DPW was able to accomplish in supporting of the schools during the summer months. That was obviously our hugely important months in terms of capital improvements, repair and maintenance. And then sometime in the March, April range, of the following years, we come as we are tonight to give you an update on the capital improvements, the plan, because obviously we'll update and be revised each year, and then also work together with myself, DPW director, school committee, and the mayor, and city administration, city council, obviously, on funding. That's the last piece is just, Mike, if you can give folks an update on where things are with Beaman and Plum Cove modulars, that'd be a big help.
Sure. So the assessment of Plum Cove and Beaman took place over the late winter, and we determined that Beaman was worse condition than we thought, and Plumco was in better condition than we thought. So in order to balance the money, we're gonna focus on Beaman this summer and push Plumco off to next summer. It just makes sense not to have too many things open. And obviously, we can't function without those two wings of those elementary schools, so they have to be up and running when school begins. So the general contracting bid for Beaman was open today. Haven't vetted all the pricing yet, can't really say who has it yet, because I don't know that. The final sub bids were opened 2 weeks ago. The value of this project requires that certain trades file separate bids than the general contractors filed sub bid. So we've, there's mechanical, electrical, maybe some metal work involved, roofing work. So that's done. We should be able to sort through the bids by this time next week, and we'll award a contract within the week to follow. So it's moving along. It's on schedule. We got a good team working on this project. I think it'll be a success.
Good question. On the Beaman project, can you tell me what that's gonna look like over the summer? So what, if I was to walk up to Beaman School, what would I see going on?
You'll see dumpsters, you'll see staging, you'll see piles of material. It'll be cordoned off because it's not a place where people can play.
Okay. And is this something that will be happening during the week? Like, and how long, what's the timeline on it, do you think?
We're gonna need every day we can once this starts, because obviously we can't begin until the students are gone. So we have a very short window to get everything completed. And any delay in materials or delay in conditions can really put this thing sideways.
Exactly.
So it's tight. Summers aren't a great time to try to get everything done. But these builders are used to that because they do other school type work. So it'll be congested, it'll be busy site. Typically, these guys work, contractors work Monday through Friday, 7 to 4 hours. They can work 6 to 8 if they chose to under the city ordinance. I don't think they'll work a second shift.
Okay. I'm just curious. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of projects starting, and I can't help but wonder, knowing delays that I'm aware of in the city that are preventing projects from happening on time. I guess I get concerned if we start a project, can we complete it in time? Is it worth starting if we know if we can't get the materials immediately? I'm not trying to deter anything, but I just want to, I guess, hear the confidence from you, a trusted soul, that once we start this, it's going to happen by the time school opens.
We've looked at various materials in the lead time, and we've actually just substituted some of them just because the lead time is too long. So that's kind of been thought of already.
Okay.
I can't say for certain that we won't run into something else.
Yeah.
You run into stuff all the time. But again, we have a really good team on this. She was a pretty qualified contractors bidding on this, and hopefully that the low bid is qualified and we can use them.
Thank you.
Then we've discussed how, for example, the rooftop units at Beaman, because lead times are so long at this point, you wouldn't do, I think this is so that you wouldn't be able to do the work this summer, but prepare for the finish that Beaman the following summer.
So, there needs to be new roof put on the modulars that will require the rooftop units removed, which are the heating and cooling units, air handlers. Those will be brought down to the ground, now roof done, and those we've replaced. Those will be put back with the understanding that when the new ones are available, the contractor will be back to install new rooftop units, because those are not a short lead time. Those are probably 6 months. And they work, but they are they're at the end of the life expectancy as well. So it makes sense to kind of include those now, prepare for the installation of the new ones, but use the old ones until the new ones are available.
Just following up on Melissa, so we also have the Gordon program this summer at Beam. I'm just wondering about it's a big project. And we have summer programs at Beam. So I'm just wondering how, parking, noise, how that's going to interact with the students who are there.
Great.
Yeah, just, I do want to mention that we're moving the bulk of the summer program over to West Parish for for the summer.
Okay.
And I've talked to Gary about putting some extra contracted cleaning services in place because of the shorter turnaround and the amount of kids who will be in the building in West Parish. So some additional days, weeks, I think, even to, this was in talking with Joe Lucido about any extra help that might be needed to turn things around quickly. So there will be a small footprint at Beaman, and it'll just be the summer science and engineering camp, but that will just be 2 to 3 classrooms rather than using a lot of the school.
One of the things we're gonna have to, we haven't discussed yet, but it's just the process for getting folks out of the monitors. I'll check it.
We'll have a pre-construction meeting with you, your team, the building principal, the architects, and we can put the layout, plans, the transition plans that are necessary.
Questions? Thank you, Mike. Thanks for coming tonight. Thanks for the
Thank you.
collaboration.
Thank you.
See you.
It's always nice to have you come because we are so appreciative of how smoothly everything is going.
It's true.
All the-
Appreciate that.
Absolutely. Without the back and forth, it's, as a team, I think we're getting a lot more done. One
Thank you.
The other was trying to advocate. Okay. The next order of business is the K-5 literacy pilot update. And Greg Bach, Assistant Superintendent, will lead it, but we have some more fabulous here. Yes.
Yes, I get the job of probably getting thanks from the committee for all the work that and the hundreds of hours of work that other people have done. So I'll try to do my best, as I usually try to do, to acknowledge the work that they do, though, as you can imagine, it doesn't even come close to what's happening behind the scenes. And it's also one of my more enjoyable times of the year is when we get an opportunity to not only present our work, but also have people who've been doing the work get to be in front of you. I know you appreciate it very much. And I also want to thank the school committee for being such a great audience, because the only way I can get people to come is because their colleagues share, it's such a boost to go to the school committee. And that's just not the case with all school committees. And to be able to walk away from a school committee really feeling energized and ready to do more is great. So thank you for bumping to 8 o'clock. That was excellent timing. Right on. So a few acknowledgements. Actually, to get started, we're here to talk about the ELA pilot that I have mentioned earlier that we were undergoing all year long. And you asked for a report at the end of that to see what we had selected and where we go from here. Along that way, there are too many people to list, but we have an entire pilot team of 20 plus people when you include additional, we had 19 classroom teachers, and we also had Title I teachers, English learner teachers. We had, additional supporting staff who came. Maura Donahue, who you've met, who is working at the middle school, also attended a number of the meetings so that there would be some crossover to the middle school potentially, just as far as gathering information. Melissa Orkin from Crafting Minds, who we have mentioned before, has worked very closely with the reading coaches for a number of years now, as their, in some ways, their personal consultant. And she absolutely loves working with Gloucester because of the reading coaches. initially and now because of the teachers she's met. So she's been an incredible asset. She's at Tufts University as well as has her own consulting firm, Crafted Minds. So we had a large group of pilot team working since last, I don't even know when. There was a summer kickoff meeting, and they have been working steadily, hours and hours of work in their schools, but also after school meetings. And you're going to see a little bit about the kind of work that they did. Well, we've collected some of the thoughts that they recorded along the way. So some virtual Post-it notes from November, and their results and their thoughts from by April. Anne-Marie Wenzel and Shannon Camo are two teachers who were pilot teachers and were kind enough to join us tonight. And Adrian Ricky Munn and Melissa Francis, and you've met them before. They are literacy coaches from West Parish and East Gloucester, and they've been in front of you a number of times. So thank you to the four of you for coming tonight. We have been talking about having to, research. We've had Reading Street for 10 years, maybe even a tiny bit more than 10 years. And it was time to take a look at what was out there, what has developed, how we were doing, how our results were looking, and if there was room for improvement. And as we have shared over time, you've been great cheerleaders for until 2019, which was the last official marking point. We've had 5 years of steady increase at the elementary level. I showed you at one point a graph that looked like that with an average percentile rank in state, how we compare at our elementary schools to other elementary schools all across the state. In 2013, Gloucester Public Schools elementary schools had an average rank in state of 39.5%. By 2019, which was the last official measure, that had risen from 39.5 to 58th percentile in the state. And that is really incredible, steady increases both in math and literacy.
Can you say that again and a little louder? Thank you.
I do love this slide. You'll notice though that we've made really good steady progress. It's a great trend line. There's a little bit of beginning to see some flattening, and that is when it's time. I almost did that. And the IT guys, I could just imagine them on the other end of this line. Put the top on if you're out there. So we have strong early literacy indicators. First grade, and the teachers and coaches can talk a little bit more about this in detail. I'm sure you'll have plenty of questions. I prepped them already to let them know that you ask a lot of questions and they're good. 75% meeting or exceeding benchmarks in Dibble's 8 composite, 75 in third grade, fourth grade, a little bit lower at 62%. By fifth grade, even though our MCAS scores are still quite strong, and fifth grade is at or well above the state average in ALA. Some of the there's a little bit of a decline that begins to become apparent, and by sixth grade, that performance is not just flattened out, but has declined relative to their peers in the state. We also know and have known for a while that we're not just talking about a sixth grade or seventh or eighth grade problem. We know that there are foundational pieces that need to be in place for kids to be successful in middle school and high school. And this incredibly dedicated group of people was not comfortable resting on indicators of really good and continued performance. They wanted to get under the hood and understand what can we do more to prepare our kids for the challenging kinds of texts and thinking
and discussion and writing that they encounter in middle school and high school. And that's a lot of the work that they've been doing, is to try to understand how we can strengthen that so that performance in later years is that much better. Over to you, Melissa. Oh, no, sorry, Adrian.
Can you go to the next slide?
Sorry.
That's fine, great. So as Greg was just saying, we have all of this data and we have all this research. We are in an age of lots of research, which is really wonderful. And so we're using all of that to really inform our decision throughout this entire process.
I'm sorry, on my screen, it shows the reading room, which is why I couldn't understand. what
Oh.
you said. And I didn't look up there, so I'm gonna try it again and see what happens.
Perfect.
Okay, it's now one slide behind what's on the screen, so I'm just gonna,
Might have it in presenters mode, so that you can see what's coming.
excuse me.
You may have it in presenters mode, so you can see what's coming.
Well, I'm sorry, but it was right on target.
Melissa Francis with the technical.
Yeah, that
needs to be recorded.
It wasn't sent until this slide.
All right, so I do need. Anyway, I can talk about Scarborough's reading room. So,
It's a delay.
so this previous slide that will come up, is all about that research. So, Paul Scarborough was a researcher. Oh, there. Right, to figure it out. I'll keep talking. Paul was a researcher for back in the 1990s, tried to figure out a way to explain to educators and to parents about the really complex process that it is to learn to read. Prior to that, it was sort of this mystical process. Who knows? I don't remember how I learned to read. I'm not sure if many people do. But we have so much information and so much research to, and really cognitive research, neurocognitive research to really lay this out in layman's terms. It's really, and this infographic was created based on all of that research. And so what we're finding and what we know in Gloucester, that first part of this reading rope in that, that orange section is the word recognition section. That's where the foundational skills are. That's where that 75% meeting or exceeding benchmark in K1 and 2 district-wide, like that, we have that down. We've been focusing on that for the last decade and more. And then this other part of the learning to read strand is this language comprehension strand. And Reading Street, which we know as teachers really lacked so many of these vital components that are interwoven in learning how to read. So our students were learning and gaining these foundational skills, word recognition, and then flatlining when it came to 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And it looked like it was a middle school, high school problem, but it really is an elementary school problem because we need more direct, explicit instruction in language comprehension. So this is what really spurred us on to research and dive into trying to adopt a curriculum that focused on this language comprehension portion of reading. Anything want to add there later? No, you don't have to.
I did it.
It
again.
did.
It's not, for
So
some
this is
reason.
what is the, I remember. So what does the
Okay,
research
yeah.
say? And what, when we were thinking about and looking into adopting the curriculum, we used priorities. Like we really discussed, based on the research, discussed the priorities in vetting a curriculum that would meet the needs of our students is based on research. And so it really comes down to these 3 really main tenets. That discourse, oral language development is huge. The speaking and listening, interaction between students and teachers, students and students is really an integral part in learning and laying the foundation for learning how to read. It's a vital piece of that. The building of background knowledge and comprehension, that a lot of our students in middle school and high school don't have enough of this background knowledge, so they can read the words, they know the sounds, they can put it all together, they can read the words, they have some basic understanding, but we're really teaching more of a narrow skills-based approach, like let's find the main idea. This is how you make inferences, as opposed to this is the topic and all the complexities of this, the civil rights movement and all of the building all the background knowledge about the people involved and the cause and effect of all of those on our society and really played out in our world today. So that's where the background knowledge and comprehension really comes in, and that was missing. That really was missing from our curriculum and is so important in order to become skilled readers. And the last part is that writing instruction, that skilled readers are skilled writers and vice versa. And in order to really cement the background knowledge and comprehension into our long-term memories, that writing instruction needs to be solid. That's where that cementing into our long-term memories, all the background knowledge, and being able to then retrieve it later on when you're in high school, like, oh, in second grade, I learned about the civil rights movement. It's really this interconnectedness between all of those pieces. So that was the basis, those are the priorities that we were using in order to vet a curriculum, find one that really was working. And this is just a quote that really kind of sums it up nicely. Children develop language through fine-tuned conversational interactions with adults, present sophisticated vocabulary and advanced language models. Not this dumbing down, but really asking students and teachers to use the highest lexicon that they have available and then explaining what that means, as opposed to, you know, just really shallow conversations and shallow language, basically. Yeah. So that's really led us to this next part, which is the process. So I think Melissa is going to talk about the process. Yeah. Any questions? I'm sorry, that was a lot of information
Good information.
about decades of research I tried to put into 3 slides. Sorry.
So I'm just trying to follow all this. 'Cause your
Yes, I
enthusiasm is
know.
So like, wow, and I'm like, wow, this is awesome, but what's really going on here?
Yes,
So this is work that's being done at the elementary level right now, or O'Malley?
correct.
It's at O'Malley.
At the elementary.
At
level.
elementary. So I guess my question is, how, this is great.
Mhm.
So the elementary is on the path, but what are we doing to bring the older kids up to speed with this knowledge and that you're finding out, using these priorities for the elementary school level? What are we doing to pose that? Is that coming?
It's coming, the
Okay.
middle school is already engaged in this
Awesome.
We
same
knew it was good. It's
kind
a
of
great question.
process.
Okay.
And so they'll be sharing their findings and.
I'm just so happy for the elementary. I'm like, but what about everybody else?
Right.
So how is this gonna
Yeah.
get
It's coming,
infiltrated through the
Yeah.
school?
it's underway.
One important is that you touched on was as well, as you said, it's part of the element, what's happening, I know O'Malley is part of the elementary challenge, okay? And so with what the folks are gonna get to in terms of the curriculum, we'll better prepare and focus in our 6th graders, essentially rising 6th graders, will be further along than they are right now. Now, and there's work which, you know, to be done at O'Malley, without a doubt.
Right.
As we said again and again, all the work that elementary teachers have been doing for the past 7, 8 years or so, that whole process, which has now been repeated twice, you know, Reading Streets and now Written Wisdom, needs to happen and it started to happen before to the ELA and then math and science social studies at O'Malley. So, but it's all, you know, what we learn at elementary through the fantastic work of our teachers and coaches and good leadership and support. Really, we've got to take those lessons and apply them to O'Malley.
And this is we have to be invested in this process for sure. I mean, this is not going to be a year's turnaround time. Now we're going to see MCAS scores. This is like a 3 to 5 year process before we really start to see, like, you know, the fruits of our labor within this, because it's this vertical building of knowledge, K through 5, and then hopefully, like you're saying, like 6 through 8 would obviously be
I just
ideal,
don't want to see like
continuum.
one group doing very well and
Yeah,
all this one
of
missed
course,
it, you know
yeah.
what I mean? So
Mhm.
how do we help though, how do we bring that knowledge to the kids that have passed the stage that we're at now, I guess it's.
I want to dovetail on what she's saying, but in the opposite direction. Because I don't think, it could start a lot sooner than kindergarten. You know, what you said about the shallow language kind of thing that you were talking about, kind of hit home with me, because when I was raising my little boy, I didn't dumb down my language one bit. I used scientific terms, I challenged him, he's become quite articulate, incredible vocabulary.
Yeah.
Pretty impressive, I mean, but I think, I mean, is there any kind of like early outreach to clue like parents into, you don't have to baby talk to your kids, even if they're babies.
Just
Use complex
Yes.
language
So
and,
you make a great point. We have discussed it. We don't have a process yet for it, but obviously parent support and outreach is vital to this process. So yes, within elementary schools, but then, yeah, I mean, it would be wonderful. I wish I could sit at Beverly Hospital on the maternity ward and hand their books.
circle the line, no baby
Yes,
talk. Like,
yes.
huh? You don't have to assume your kids need baby talk.
Right, of course, yeah. And then we also have to work with, what we have too, right? So not everyone has that, like you're saying, that early language, rich language.
Yeah.
And so we have lots of students that are coming in with, already behind the eight ball,
Yeah.
really already behind. So we're really tasked with meeting them where they are and trying to really advance that language, because it would be wonderful, obviously, to start as young as possible.
Yeah.
Just
takes a little awareness, I think.
yeah, of course, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, of course. And then-
Oh, yeah, sorry. I was just, I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole, but Greg gave me a book a couple months ago called The Knowledge Gap.
Yes,
And
this is it, right
and just listening to you speak, I connected the dots. I was like.
You got the
wow.
Velcro balls
happening,
right?
And it doesn't really matter. You can set kids up in elementary school, give them all the, and again, I'm not speaking with any type of intelligence on it, but, give them the framework. But if they don't have, and I wrote down background knowledge or language comprehension skills, then they go into middle school with kind of just a shell without that shell being filled with knowledge. And the book, to me, really talked about how excited kids were about knowledge learning, like they were interested in stuff.
That's why we have our teachers here today, because they're just, I don't know who's more excited, the teachers or their students.
They're no more excited than I am, because I'm not the greatest reader in the world. I buzzed through that book in about 4 days, and I was like, if every parent, every school administrator read that book, you would understand that gap that sometimes happens between elementary school and middle school. I couldn't have been more happy to read it.
You teed it up perfectly.
Yes, we did. Yes,
For
you
what's
did.
coming in the middle of the
Good,
presentation.
I'm
For
very
sure.
excited.
And by the way, we also had the author of Knowledge Gap, spoke to all of our K-5 teachers on March 29th.
And I wasn't invited.
Yes,
Now
He's
you
a
can be
groupie now.
now, chair at the end of this and say, reach under and.
The knowledge,
So we could all
I'll
be-
pass it on.
All right.
So I just, I know from my son's experience, this idea, I can really relate to this skill-based teaching in terms of literacy.
Mhm.
And I think at the time that we adopted that and kind of changed, that was really needed at the time, right? But I do know from the kids, they kept begging for more science, they kept begging for, reading passages that were relevant and interesting. And you're in the library trying to pick out an interesting book, right? You're trying to guide kids towards that content that they would find interesting, not the stuff they were learning in their ELA class,
Right.
because that was not particularly interesting, right?
Who goes to the library and say, I want to learn more about Maine ideas.
Right.
So the difference is,
Yeah, so that's,
But I think you make a great point,
Yeah.
because we want to be sure that the pendulum doesn't swing so far the other way that we forget about those foundational skills that we actually
That's not
need
going
so that they
anywhere.
can dive into the content. So we believe now that we have finally found that balance, and we're going to be very cautious not to let the pendulum go, because when I arrived teaching, it was thematic units, and we realized we were teaching them how to read however we wanted, in our classrooms. And then we realized we needed that skills instruction, foundational skills. And now we're realizing, wait, we swayed a little too far away from the content. Let's get back to it. So we found that balance, and I think we're in a really great place. So we're going to continue, or we're never going to get there. So I have the fortunate pleasure of sharing the process with you, which I have to say, I had sleepless nights. And why not take on a huge task during the pandemic? It will be fun, they said. But as you know, we did the Knowledge Gap. We were reading, we were doing the research, and we knew it was something that was going to be worthwhile and it was something that needed to be done. So we started to put together a team, and Greg will catch up.
I have to go back out every time and then back in. I apologize. Keep going.
So the coaches started to buzz and we started to chat, and we decided that we needed to start researching and finding some good programs that were out there. And as Natalie said in her book, there weren't very many just even 10 years ago. And now we're finding that there's more and more, but we narrowed it down to 2 after looking at 3 or 4. And we came up with Wit and Wisdom and CKLA. And then we said, okay, we need to create a team and find interested teachers who are willing to take on this task with us and try them out. So we came up with the game plan of having half the teachers do CKLA and half the teachers do Wit and Wisdom. Sounded like a great idea. And there were bumps in the road for sure, because then, you know, you really get invested in what you're doing and you find the love, but we kept rolling with it, and we would meet twice a month, and we would have virtual meetings, we would have in-person meetings, and we made them do surveys after survey after survey, and they're laughing because it's true. But we really wanted to capture all the good, bad, and the ugly. We wanted to find out the strengths of the program, the needs of the programs. We really wanted to get to the heart of it, and we knew we wanted the timeline so we could start the slow adoption. Because of purchasing, because of ordering, because of materials arriving, which unfortunately these ladies know, we had a late start even with that because of materials arriving late, but it did not stop the pilot team. I will give them a million kudos. Materials were arriving in October and they were still willing to just dive right in. Usually you want about a summer to plan, and they had a day. So it was really amazing, the work that was put in and all that was involved. There were, as Greg had mentioned, you can jump ahead to the numbers at a glance if it ever gets there. 19 teachers that took it on. There were supposed to be 20, but one changed a role, so that's why the odd number, just in case you were wondering. And we had additional support staff, but we had 520 plus students involved in this pilot as well. So they were getting the benefits of this content, knowledge, learning, even just in the pilot process. So that's pretty exciting when you think K through 5 across the district, 500 students were impacted, which is really incredible. So like I said, we started out in September. Are you there with me now? Nope. One more.
And now it's 143 days. Today was 143.
Yeah, 143 days that we've been.
And why that is really vital number to highlight there, 143, just jumping in on that, is because we talked to many other districts throughout this process, ones that have adopted Wit and Wisdom or CKLA, ones that were in the same process as we were. And we had different coaches call us, so teachers, we have 2 weeks to try out Wit and Wisdom and then have to make a decision. Or we talked to administrators who are like, well, we just decided on this curriculum for our district. And so we really wanted to lay the foundation here that we've never, I've been here about 20 years in my time here, we've never had this thorough of a process with as many people, teachers, staff members, and time spent with the actual curriculum before making the decision. So we're not going into it lightly.
Listen,
And I
sorry.
have to.
Sorry. Adrian, what you just heard, and I hear you nodding, it's gigantic. It's a real big difference than what happens typically in schools, sadly, across the Commonwealth, across the country. This type of thorough process is rare, it is the absolute right way to do it, and I'm just couldn't be more pleased from all the work done, because it has been done and will continue to be done in a way that really supports teachers, helps them, make good decisions, help us make good decisions, and then ultimately help this teacher and the students. But it is absolutely the way to do it, and it's rare. It's very, very good.
So, and I have the ongoing joke with us was our teachers would run to us after the meetings and say, okay, what was the decision? Which way are we going? I'm like, you guys are making the decision. Like, we can't tell you the decision. We don't know. You're deciding this. That's what all these surveys are about, right? So it was a process, and it was hard to know which direction we were going. Some days we were going with one curriculum and then the other, which you're going to learn along the way. But Melissa Orkin and Greg really helped, guide that, the coaches, the teachers. We really worked together. And then
I'll jump on.
Yeah.
Board, and the teachers.
And the
will jump in
teachers
on
are
this
going
as
to jump
well.
in, yeah.
So Anne Marie and Shannon can jump in at any time. I'll just set us up and kind of take it from there. So this was a jam board. We had a virtual meeting in November. And during that time, we had teachers at each grade level, regardless of the curriculum that they were using, but Post-it notes on this jam board of things they were really excited about with the curriculum. It was November. Some teachers did not have materials until October. Had only been with it potentially some for 6 weeks, even less than that. So I wanted to just frame that before you hear and read some of what they were experiencing. I don't know if you want to just kind of touch. Shannon, are you in the second chair?
I am in third grade. So I teach third grade at Plum Cove. And so I work with all third graders. We do a co-teaching model. So all of the third graders at Plum were involved in the pilot. And to be honest, I think like the coaches had mentioned, when we received training over the summer, there was a lot of apprehension. It was a big shift from what we've done. And there was a lot of anxiety thinking about educating students in reading for 90 minutes, whole group, and keeping them engaged, and hearing from people who have used these materials before that the text is very challenging and students might not be able to read it independently. There was a lot of apprehension, a lot of concern. And we very quickly found, although I think in November, we were still working our way through the bumps and having our hard days and planning and whatnot and pacing, and that these students were more engaged and were more focused and more excited about learning than I have seen in my almost 20 years here. They eat this material up, and it is so fantastic for all students. So we were really concerned about our struggling readers. These kids were able to participate in ways that I have never seen them participate in classroom discussion. They are the kids that need these materials and these types of books in front of them more than anybody. And this is the first time they're getting that, because we used to think they couldn't decode it, so they weren't ready for that, and they weren't ever going to get there. And then kids at all levels are engaged, and they are moving, and they are growing, and it has been a remarkable experience to be a part of, and to see that growth and that enthusiasm and that excitement.
I just highlighted on these note pages with the clouds, those are just a couple call outs that I put on there, and I'm glad you mentioned students who weren't strong decoders before. I would think maybe they're not ready for this
They would
content.
spend their reading time
And that's
working
one
into
of the-
codable readers.
That's one of the ones that I wanted to show you was, I've been thrilled to see friends who may not be strong decoders participate in an engaged and active way in the knowledge portion, being leaders and exuding confidence. And they were already starting to see that in November, that kids who might have been prevented from accessing that kind of rich content before, were able to do that, and very excited by it. You have these in your packet, so you can look through the notes. Fifth grade, couple call outs there too.
Absolutely. So I teach fifth grade, and I'm the nonfiction reading, writing, science teacher in my team. And my counterpart, Sarah Amadon, is the fiction reading, writing, social studies teacher. And the program that I tried out was Wit and Wisdom, and it ended up meeting our needs beautifully. Because in the older grades, they're expecting that our students are getting 50% nonfiction text and 50% fiction text. And that's not always necessarily easy to do. It wasn't really easy to do with Reading Street, because the text that they were reading wasn't really deep enough. It was usually just an excerpt. And the other problem was it wasn't really engaging for everybody. And they were using, basal readers. Whereas this time around, every child gets a book and it's theirs for the unit. So this is the unit that we're currently in. There's I think a Post-it note up there about the Who's On First skit that the fifth graders do. Because they're reading The Phantom Tollbooth in fifth grade and then writing their narrative piece after reading The Phantom Tollbooth. And one of our ELLs, who is also on an IEP, didn't really have a lot to say in class about it, but I ended up hearing from his home therapist that he was telling that to everybody after school. So it was really nice to see that he took it with him, even though he didn't show a lot at school, he took it with him. The engaging piece is just tremendous. The first part of the school year, we were looking at Native American tribes and the westward movement and the problems that came up because of that. So we've had some really in-depth conversations to the point where I had a student who's asked me now twice because it came up again in the Civil War. Ms. Wenzel, why are you talking so badly about the white people? And I said, I'm not talking badly about the white people. I said, this is just a part of history. I said, and hopefully what you're learning is that there's not just one part of history, there are multiple parts of history. I said, and I hope what you're taking from this is enough information that you can form your own opinions. So that was a little bit frightening for me at first because of the material that we were handed. We didn't know what they were going to do with it. But some of the best conversations that we've had this year are my students in particular learning the art of conversation, where somebody has to speak, somebody has to listen, and then you actually have to say something back to that person so that they know that you were listening to them. And they're learning how to question, and they're learning how to question not simply with just yes or no answers. They're really asking each other in-depth questions. So that has all worked together really nicely. I will tell you that I think we unintentionally created this gap with our students by giving them leveled readers based on what they could handle, thinking that's all they could currently handle on their own, right? Without our support. And my students this year were just so thrilled to all get the same book and they could all have the same conversation. So no matter where they were at, they could all have a conversation about the same topic. So I catch them sometimes on the way down to the cafeteria or outside to recess, and they're having conversations about things that were happening in class, which is just amazing and what we really want for them. You know, you can't become analytical without actually having these conversations with each other.
And you bring up that, I think it's a huge point, actually, with both curricula as well. It was this equity, like creating this equity among students, which was really, I think, one of the most beautiful, you know, outcomes of this whole process.
Yeah.
I do. One of the things that I think is important is that the parents become aware that, hey, their kids are really excited about reading and learning. I mean, what's the conduit for that? Besides, there is a conduit outside of the twice yearly parent conference teacher meeting where you get
I've been
2 seconds.
using Class Dojo this year, which has and actually the students were making these Civil War posters. You'll see an example of it later on, but they were actually able to use their Chromebooks, take pictures of their posters, and then drop them into a portfolio on Class Dojo. And then their parents were able to go into the dojo and look at them. And then while they're working, I've been walking around the room, taking snapshots of them doing different things and posting their work in their portfolio so that their families can actually see it. Because I had one student tell me, you know, Ms. Wenzel, my mother asks me every day, what do I do at school? And I don't know what to tell her. And I said, what do you mean you don't know what to tell her? We just did a lot of things at school. She said, yeah, but I forget by the time I get there. I said,
While you're in this area and you're talking about what students are encountering and the question you just asked is we can address in a moment. I just skipped ahead one slide. We then met again in April to that followed the March PD and also for that professional development, the teachers shared much more extensive. So we got the Post-it notes from November with initial impressions, and now they can just slide right into, these are the kinds of things, and you can see some pictures. They brought some samples. Now you can go right into the heart of the curriculum and what you explored over the year.
And just to piggyback on that, the program itself does have like parent letters that you can send home that like talk about and preview the topics coming, what the expectations and objectives are of the, they're not called units, they're called modules. So there's 4 modules, right?
Has suggested books. I have heard from more parents this year about what we've been doing because the kids are going home so excited about the content. They are checking books out of the library. I just had a student, you'll see later, and I have the materials with me. We've been focused on a module on space, and we focused and we looked at really deeply the Apollo 11 moon landing. And I had a student go to Cape Canaveral over this past vacation and came back so incredibly excited to bring this gorgeous book that they bought that had to have been a $45 book of the Apollo 11 mission that was signed by 2 astronauts that were at Cape Canaveral. Like, they are that enthusiastic about the content, and they understand now. I had asked my students prior to this meeting what they thought I should share with the team when I went to this meeting. And they said that they now understand the purpose of reading, that before this program and when we were doing Reading Street and reading a book, a story week, and they didn't understand that reading was to learn and comprehend and take with you the information from what you had read, and now they do. And so they're going home talking about this, and the parents are learning along with their students, and they're contacting me saying, I never knew, I didn't know about this. And so they are hearing about it, and we do share those letters in student work. And I think because we have been so enthusiastic throughout the process, we have taken a lot of pictures and shared them electronically with families. And so one of the things that we haven't talked about that it was a huge strength of this program that we were really excited about is the writing as well. And you have read that in the knowledge gap. It was part of what Adrian shared with you. Every day the students it's all around the same content and around the same learning. Everything is very purposeful and everything is carefully planned. And so students are writing about what they're reading, and there is a focus, a different type of writing for each module. And so students really, we focus on what we see in the text and how the authors in these texts did it. And then how do we craft that and how do we write about what we've learned? And our students' writing has grown so much more than we had seen with Empowering Writers, which was the previous writing curriculum. And it's very seamless, and now they understand better the reciprocal nature of this. So you can see here, this is actually my daughter's 4th grade, so I have the unique perspective of being a teacher doing this and also a parent of a student who was doing this. And this is her classroom, and they were they were gathering information for a Socratic seminar. So the speaking and listening piece where they have a conversation around a question that they worked together to gather evidence from the text to support their thinking when they shared. You can see some of just the amazing materials and the work. There's like a lot of engagement due to the nature of the activities. And so it's not 90 minutes of us standing in front of kids talking. It's us introducing something, the kids going off and working in small groups or in partners or independently, coming back together, talking. There's a lot of really great routines and engaging activities that they love. And that was one of the other things they really mentioned. We love all the group work. We love talking with one another, gathering information together.
Greg, if you go to the next slide, this is actually from CKLA. So we do have slides in here, teachers' testimonials and some artifacts from the other program as well, because it was really difficult. It was a difficult decision to make. I think we'll talk later about the results, but CKLA also had some really fantastic results. The kids were equally enthused because each of our buildings, we had both programs happening. And so this buzz about, and all the other teachers were like, which one can I just jump in someone's classroom? Can I steal a manual? Like, it was just so exciting that either one of these, we really felt like they both had really strong components and could meet the needs of our students. And then one came out a little bit stronger. Just wanted to frame that, just as excited about some of the other.
So I hesitated, there's so much that we want to get through, and I know that, and I'm a parent in this age group, so I'm observing and what I know from home. And sort of one observation and one question. I remember reading years ago about the research they did on language and small children, just literally the amount of words spoken at home in person and how that impacted. And it feels, you know, that was a direct impact on future learning, reading, et cetera. Feels like this is coming, like this is sort of a natural outgrowth of that. Some of that research was like live versus screens, right? So I'm, you know, for me, like all this seems like very amazing and logical, right? This is how we used to learn, or I learned, right? Because like reading was so exciting because you learned all these things. But I don't know as much as you do about the processes you have to do to build the foundations, right? So I guess just an interesting observation to say, like what you're saying, like they didn't know why they were reading, but if you can introduce kids to why you would want to read, right, then every kid would read. I mean, you know that better. So, so I don't know where screens fit into this. I know that a lot of our learning, more than I would like for my children, happens on screens. And so I'm wondering how this works with the screens. And yeah.
For me personally, there's far less screen time than in previous years. I would say when we were doing Reading Street. There are some really great video clips and things. So when we were talking about space, we watched President Kennedy's part of his speech about why choose the moon. We watched Walter Cronkite report the actual time of landing. You heard Anne Marie talk about, they watched the clip of Who's on First, but it's very purposeful, it's very quick, and then there is deep discussion around the screen time. So it's far less. They do some word processing with the writing because that is expected of them. But they're not doing as much like independent work on the Chromebook. I will say it has a fantastic digital component. So when we had kids out because of COVID or quarantining or whatever, there were video lessons that we could easily assign, because this was something that was a concern as well, is what do we send home with students who are missing for significant amounts of time. They have video lessons that they created due to the pandemic that kids can easily be assigned and kind of keep up. And kids who did that work came back without missing a beat, or for the most part. And that also helped keep parents in the loop and they were learning along with their students.
I want to say, like, even when I was becoming a teacher 20 years ago, you know, it was like all about being like, you're a guide on the side. What was the other one? You're a, you know, a sage on the stage. Like you're just going to help them. And this is, no, you are explicitly teaching the content and explicitly teaching them how to write and explicitly teaching them how to think critically.
And how to learn.
Yeah, it really, I think that's the difference. It's less about like the thematic unit of just learning about the seasons and how all those things go together, and we're gonna plant seeds and do this. Like, no, it's like we're going to read about this topic and then we're going to really dive into it. I mean, there's some things like on the Jamboards, I think it's actually on this one, it says, this teacher talked about building a stronger background on topics, the kids are building stronger background knowledge on topics that she hadn't learned until middle and high school.
Yeah.
Like it's that, Jean Piaget had said early on, like, oh, they're developmentally not ready for this. Well, that's true. They are. So we were kind of operating under that, not developmentally appropriate, but it actually is, because you are teaching them to be critical thinkers and readers. So, and you have to grapple with this kind of content in order to do that. Yeah, absolutely. The apples are great, but.
So while you've been talking, for the benefit of the home audience, I moved ahead every now and then. This was a great slide to highlight. That if you didn't see that quote, that's a perfect one. Kind of summarizes, really sums up what they've been talking about. And if it will, there it goes. I think we just have this one, which we've talked about the writing component. And then there's the Civil War piece. Take a moment to share that.
Absolutely. So they have a nonfiction text, The Boys' War, And then they have a fiction text for the
Sorry, it
twins.
didn't keep up.
That's okay.
That's why.
I got it.
We know it's
I'm just-
So they
That's-
are the content, not to be confused with thematic learning, right? Because there's an actual difference. And so the content is actually driving their knowledge at this point. So, and that's both in their reading and their writing. And not only is it reading and writing, it's speaking, it's listening, it's fluency, it's comprehension, it's vocabulary. We've been working with morphology and analyzing words in 5th grade, and that's been a joy to watch them kind of go, oh, wow, look at that, and then go looking for other words that fit that model. They have fluency homework that they take home, and I can send this around because one of the students went home and did her fluency homework with her dad, and it's just covered with all these notes about how the week went and how she really did a great job. And these are these books, if you want to throw those around. This is the student workbook, which I absolutely love, because sometimes you think about a workbook and you're like, oh, like I went to Catholic school, so I hear workbook and I'm like, but that's not what their workbooks are at all.
The only problem is there actually isn't enough space to write. The kids have so much that they want to write, and actually it's like they just need, but the structures themselves are really.
Yep, and then they have journals, right? So they have their journals that they keep while they're working on their unit. And we started the Civil War unit, and just by listening and looking at a few pages in the book, The Boys' War, I was watching students with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages of information and questions. And how did a 12-year-old sign up for war? How could that possibly happen? What do you mean their parents let them go? It became, it became a thing. And then the war with Russia and Ukraine broke out. And then all of a sudden they were like, so is this what is happening there? And so they started watching the news. They were trying to make connections. They were trying to really make it so that they could understand what was going on in the world, right? And this is definitely helping them. This is the teacher edition. And I'm sure that some of my colleagues might panic a little when they see the teacher edition, but it's just like when we took on our science program. This is great for me. I need it. It's helping me to teach them better. But the online component, like Shannon was saying, has this whole section that they developed for the pandemic. So there's these slides that are already ready-made, good to go. And so if I really need to, I can rely on the slides. And so they're a more condensed version of what I need to do. And then this just helps me fill in the background piece for myself so that I understand what I'm supposed to be doing with them. They also have assessment stuff online as well. So I have a few of their new read assessments and their samples. And I included the standards for myself so that I know what I'm looking at, and this way I can grade out for them. Easier when it comes, because we're a standards-based report card. So it helps me when I'm giving them an assessment that I'm still making sure that we're covering our standards. But the standards and the skills are not a checklist with this. Like I'm not going through and saying, like Adrian said, oh yes, I taught the main ideas, so we're good to go. Oh, I taught inferencing, so we're good to go. Oh, we did vocabulary today, we're good to go. It's literally in every single lesson that I'm doing with them, every single day.
What grade are you in?
5th grade.
Really?
Mhm.
Wow.
While you're taking a look at those, this last slide here was just prior to the decision that that we made not too long ago.
Yep.
And I think it's worth just reading out loud. This was at the culmination of both pilot program teams meeting for a series of very long meetings to make the decision. And this was one teacher's comment. As a district, we're very fortunate because no matter which literacy program we go with, our K-5 children will be immersed in a content-rich, coherent, cumulative, and cross-curricular learning experience. Both of these curriculums inspire curiosity and drive results, empowering all students with rich vocabulary and deep background knowledge. And this was not a paid promotion. Just came from the teacher. Okay, could be. So I'm gonna, hopefully it'll keep up this time, the results. No, it didn't. You know, I can do two.
Here it is.
slides. Oh,
There we go.
So following all of what you've heard, teachers sharing their artifacts, their experience, numerous surveys, lots of knowledge building. The final survey asked a couple key questions about confidence level, and asked all of the teachers, no matter which program they had used, what was their confidence level if the other had been selected, right? If yours wasn't selected, how confident are you, based on everything you've heard from your colleagues, that that's going to be a winner? That's going to be a really good, solid program. And so there was an edge to wit and wisdom in the confidence level. I have to reiterate that both of them were extremely strong, and I really thought it was going back and forth all year long. So there was an edge on that. And then in straight out program choice, wit and wisdom won out over CKLA. So it was an extremely thorough process from two real front runners in the state. And we kept getting calls all year long from districts who were sometimes piloting, sometimes just picking between these two programs. So wit and wisdom, as you've probably figured out, was the selection. And now we're going to talk, if it advances.
And you should mention that this is,
I have to keep going off of it, and then it'll pop up. So I'll just leave it at this, and you can talk in this way. It'll move as fast as you do.
Perfect. Okay. Sorry. Adrian, did you want to add about the teachers? Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So ta-da, we picked Wit and Wisdom. I think we let the cat out of the bag a little early. Surprise, not so much.
Yours kept secret.
Ever, right?
I like the name much better.
Right.
Yes, right. So Wit and Wisdom was the choice, and the teachers really led the way. It was really their decision, right down to every conversation that we had. We listened to every teacher in the room. They got to share all of their thoughts just like they are here. And then we did the final survey, which they couldn't have been more thrilled about. That was the final survey. And we came up with Wit and Wisdom. And really the reasons is what we're going to share is why Wit and Wisdom had a little bit of the edge for us. As they have really shared very well, so I'm going to move very quickly, and Greg's, yes, you are. The building of background knowledge, absolutely. The integration of skills with the listening, speaking, reading, and writing, absolutely. There's rereading of text, because that's what good readers and thinkers do. You read something to understand it better, to get something else to understand a different perspective. So all of those things are happening. There are scaffolds in place for students who need it, but you don't use them unless you need it. It's like you have a crutch if you need it. When your leg is healed, you kick it aside. There's a lot of great differentiation within this curriculum. And we were hearing from our special ed teachers, from our L teachers, from our students who needed enrichment. We were hearing all of those things throughout this process that we weren't necessarily hearing with quite the edge of the other programs. So that was one of the reasons. The other, yep. And as you heard already, they have authentic text rather than the basal readers. So we were getting good literature from authors, putting books in the students' hands. All students had the books. That was really important to us. This was another piece of the program that kind of went back and forth, because in Natalie Wexler's book, we talk a lot about the knowledge and how you have to spend at least 3 weeks on the knowledge of one particular topic to really gain it. She talks about Velcro balls. So you have Velcro balls and you keep throwing things at them, hoping they'll stick, right? So when you have one content or one theme that you're really focusing on, one topic, you're hoping those balls will continue to stick. The thing that we noticed with Wit and Wisdom is it spends more time. So when you look at a glance, you'll see this color-coded chart and you say, oh, they're only learning about 4 topics. But when you dive deeper, yes, there's one topic, but within outer space, you're learning about Galileo, you're learning about artists, you know, and you can speak to this even more. You're learning about astronauts, you're learning so much more than just outer space. So you're learning so many different perspectives and you're integrating all of those skills constantly throughout. The other piece is the writing side, which I believe you're on. And they are really great on the writing side of the world, that making sure that all of the genres are being taught throughout the modules throughout the year. And of course, writing is one of our priorities. So this also gave it the edge that we were noticing that Wit and Wisdom just did such a thoughtful, careful process with the writing. So that was too. And if you notice with the topics, just to talk about the spiraling effects that it has in 3rd grade, they'll do civil rights. And then in 5th grade, they call it breaking barriers. And you're actually going back to the injustice and segregation. And they're taking a whole different perspective and actually talking about the history of sports and how you can have an influence and break barriers through sports. But they're bringing back some of that same vocabulary and some of those same ideas that we were having problems with in civil, you know, during the Civil War, but also during sports. So it gives the students that spiraling effect, but gaining new knowledge to then throw those Velcro balls at, right? And make those connections. So it was really, it's such a thoughtful program. And you continue to see the spiraling, the scaffolds, and the ability to continue critical thinking. So this is just an example of one of the modules and how they talk about the questions. And then in each of the focusing art questions, they start to talk about Galileo or, you know, outer space. And those are just some of the books that you can pass around, but there's great authentic texts that are connected, which is on the next slide.
Yeah,
And then each module has the end of the module task, and they're bringing all of that information back together. So the students have the opportunities to collaborate and work independently. The teacher really acts like the facilitator and has a gradual release of responsibility onto the students. So, hey, I've given you all this knowledge, we've talked about it, we've worked with it. Now it's your job to take that evidence and really put it into writing. What have I learned? And Adrian gave a great example this before when we were chatting about a student today. So go ahead.
The first time I cried today was actually in a 2nd grade classroom. I cried earlier, we were talking about reading. And so I was in a 2nd grade classroom at West Parish with Mrs. Amaro, and she's currently teaching Wit and Wisdom. And she said, oh, can the student come down and read her writing to you? And this is a student who is on IP for reading, specifically within language, struggles with expressive and receptive language, and writing in particular. And literally making all those connections, putting all those pieces together. And so she had to write from the perspective of Ruby Bridges. And she read it to me. And I was all teary-eyed. And that wasn't even the best part. It was beautifully written, and it followed a sequence. The content, it was just a really wonderful piece of writing. And I said, how did you, like, was this an easy task for you? It was a hard task from writing from someone else's perspective, you know? And she said, well, it was easy. And I thought it was going to be some kind of, you know, well, this is Mrs. Amaro gave me the sentence starters or something along those lines. And she said, well, it's easy because I already learned so much about Ruby Bridges, so I could write about her. And like, for me, I was like, oh, and so Mrs. Amaro and I were sitting at her teacher in tears. It was just so powerful just to see that connection. And I was like, I want to go back in the classroom now and start teaching again, because like, this is what I think we've really been waiting for, and we're really starting to see it all come together. So it's really a nice shift.
And I've gotten 4 or 5 pictures probably weekly from my teachers of texts saying they are all engaged. Look at them, all engaged. Every single one of them. So they are enthusiastic as well.
Those books are really interesting.
Right?
They're working more time with them. You know?
Yeah.
Give a 3rd grader a book called Shark Attack and you've got them hooked for
Yeah, same.
giant squid. Like
Right.
they really carefully picked books that would engage students.
Yeah.
And there's artwork that we look at, and that really is fantastic and ties right in. And again, it's all purposeful and it all lends itself to the content and is well connected. So for students who might not have the opportunities to visit museums and get to talk about, I mean, we're talking about composition of art and lines and color. And so it is a really new way of engaging students.
So we really talked about this a lot, but the philosophical shift, we really have talked about, but now it's about putting it into practice. So we're really going to dive into that with the rollout and how we're going to make the next couple of years happen. And Adrian's going to take it from here. You gotta give it
I'll be quick. We have literacy leaders, so we have, how many, 15 of our 19 piloters have signed up to be literacy leaders. So over the course of next year, they will be helping we'll talk about early adopters through this process as well within our schools. So not just as coaches, we have their support and they're in it every day. And so they're going to be supporting their colleagues. And that's really the best we could hope for. So we do have, in September, this June or August, anyone that wasn't teaching Wit and Wisdom, so the other part of the teachers that were teaching CKLA will be trained in Wit and Wisdom, and they will all start Wit and Wisdom in September. Any of the teachers that are currently teaching Wit and Wisdom, excellent, they get all in year 2, they'll be in year 2 of it. And then we had to think of a way, everyone wants to jump on board and it's very exciting, but we really want to be extremely purposeful in this process because there is so much that needs to go in to build the philosophical shift, learn the content itself. The logistical shift of how your classroom is run is very different. So we didn't want to just jump in everyone in September of this year. So we're going to do, we tried to figure out a rationale, we put a rationale in place to have some early adopters. So early adopters will be leveling out at grade levels. So an example of this would be at West Parish in 2nd grade, we had Tanya Romero teaching Wit and Wisdom. In 4th grade, we had 2 4th grade teachers teaching Wit and Wisdom. So in the fall, their entire grade level team will teach Wit and Wisdom. So they have each other to work with. And we had a lot of other teachers at other grade levels that wanted to jump in, but we couldn't just say yes to everyone. So we had to have a rationale. So that leveling out rationale will happen at all schools, leveling out at certain grade levels in order to have real support systems at each school. And then any new hires, anyone that is hired from now until September, will also be starting with Wisdom because it doesn't make sense to do a year of Reading Street. And any new positional changes. So a 5th grade teacher is going down to 3rd grade. Instead of learning 3rd grade Reading Street, they'll be learning 3rd grade Wit and Wisdom. Everyone else will stay the course with Reading Street for next year.
And I just want to emphasize that decision.
Yes, please,
because
yes.
that one may seem counterintuitive.
Yes,
Um,
I know, it was hard too.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So gotta bear with us.
Yes.
We've thought about this really carefully. You get one chance to have a good implementation.
Mhm.
And we have the expertise from the piloters and the advanced team that did the work this year. They are going to be laying the groundwork for the teachers. And Bill, you asked about parent readiness and communication. And we've talked about that being another thing, that we will take our literacy leader team that's comprised of people who've had all this experience to build the pieces that we want to have in place for a successful full launch. And that means anticipating some of the sensitive topics that will be coming up and preparing the teachers to have those and preparing the information that will be helpful for parents to have. We don't want to throw this out there for every teacher and have them, first of all, really changing how they teach. And you have to realize this is a monumental shift in how they do what they do. So learning the content, understanding the different approaches, learning from those who have gone before is very important for us to do over the next 12 months or so. And then this time next year, that's when we'll do the full-on launch, everybody. But we'll have a substantial number of teachers will be starting next year, and then roughly the other half or so will join on. But the first group will be really putting all those foundational pieces. There's a lot of professional development, there's PLC time, and if we rush it, we run the risk of overwhelming teachers, but also having a really uneven implementation at schools. And then one of the things that happens in that, we also have to catch up with how we may have to redesign schedules at the schools. And so if you do that in all grades, all at once, with everybody new, you are going to have problems. And one of the things that happens is habits developed during that first year are really essential for how you then continue to teach even after you've mastered some of the things. So we would like to lay down the modeling, the information and all the learning to go in with good practice and with understanding and with good preparation. And that's why we have a phased.
And a lot of teachers are very excited.
I just probably about
Same
to say
thing.
the same thing. But many, as you can see, are very enthusiastic. We're eager to do the pilot, but there are some very comfortable with what they've been doing. So we want to make sure that we give them the time and we give them the professional development and we explain the hows and whys, rather than just pushing it onto them. Because you remember the pilot team was all very willing, eager participants. So we want everybody, we want this enthusiasm to grow in our schools so that they all want to come in and join, this. So it's more than it seems. And yes, I mean, all of us were like, okay, could we start it next year? But there's so much that goes in. And I heard a term the other day that has stuck with me is learn the rules like a pro so you can break them like an artist. So you want to learn it really, really well before we decide because realistically, there's so much in this program. We can't do everything to fidelity. So we have to really be careful in this process, critically think about what can we let go of so that we can fit in as much of this as we possibly can. Because again, we don't want that pendulum to swing so far the other way that suddenly the teachers are standing up and talking and trying to fit in everything in this program and forgetting about all the other good practices that we already have in place. So it's a careful balance.
And part of our literacy leaders, I'm sure these two signed up to be literacy leaders. I don't want to assume, I didn't really actually go through. But part of their process is like next year, their doors are open. Like some of them are willing to have teachers come in and actually watch it in action and say, yes, I was nervous. I was nervous up until December, but you have to hold on and like really hear firsthand from that. And I think as a teacher, for those that might be a little bit reluctant about that change and about this huge shift, seeing it in action is so powerful, right? There's only so many like videos we can watch and hear from, but their colleague next door, I'm gonna go in there and see what she's doing every day and hear from her students. The buy-in it's critical for this to work well. And I don't have that, there's no doubt in my mind that once they see that, those that might be reluctant, they'll be, and I think the other piece of that as well, between now and then, you said it yourselves, along the way, these fearless leaders were modifying things to meet the needs of their learners, deciding what they had to do. Oh, they like that book, but they needed it to be more space. The literacy leaders are also going to be working on, oh, here's your binder of all of these assessments to do. And here it is all printed out for you. So you don't even have to go online and look for it. Like literally, we've already done so much of the vetting for you so that you don't have to be bogged down by that piece and you can focus on the content and the delivery and the excitement of the program. So like that's why it's the rollout is so integral to the whole process. Slow rollout, I should say.
I have a question. So I heard Fox say, there's sensitive topics coming up, things like that. So I'm curious to know if there's been any parent feedback as to the content of what is being taught?
There has not,
Nothing, nothing.
no, and
negative,
Only positive, actually.
positive?
Diana actually got to Thunder Rolling in the Mountains and she didn't get any feedback either, right?
Right, so one of my teachers prior to teaching it was very concerned about one of the books. And it was because of death and dying and part of history.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it happened often, still happening today. And
Is that the book we just saw?
no,
it's a different
actually,
one.
That one I
but
was
it's in
like,
the
oh,
same,
okay.
it's in the same round.
Yeah.
And she was very hesitant and was considering doing an alternative book. And then she said, if I try to do the alternative book, I'm just gonna end up creating this curriculum on my own. This is silly. I'm going to just stick with it and see what happens. And she had empathy and understanding and, you know, great questions and conversations. And the kids would be the ones leading the conversations at home. So when your child's leading conversations at home, there's nothing really to worry about because they're just asking really great, thoughtful questions with concern and, you know, or with, hey, this was really amazing that I learned about this. I can't believe this happened and it would never happen now, you know, or we wouldn't allow it to happen or whatever the conversation took them. But the kids are taking the information home in a kid-friendly way. And it's not a complaint, not a single one that I can.
Yeah, I think the teachers experience more of the anxiety
Anxiety,
of that
yeah.
beforehand, because we're not used to that. We're not used to, like, yes, in our adult lives, we read about it and we see it on the news, and there's only so much of this what to expose our children to, but they're already exposed to so much.
So much.
Especially with social media, and they're exposed to things just being thrown at their faces all the time. This will teach them to think critically about all of those sources. Like, we're teaching them to, like, don't just take it at face value. Ask the questions about that video you just saw on TikTok, or that video that you're seeing on, you know, ask questions about it. And that's, I think, the real, you know, beauty of this, that can really kind of really help them become really thinkers, not just in the classroom, but extended out into, you know, society. It's really what we're trying to do as teachers, help them become citizens, right? So. And part of the process,
One
yeah,
thing to
you gotta
add
think
to
first.
that is that, and I think it's important to remember that point about our teachers were concerned about a lot of things and it did not pan out for the
Right.
students. The students,
Yeah.
keep in mind that the students will rise to the occasion almost every single time when we think they might not be able to. And they do it, and they do it over and over again, and we need to have that faith in our teachers for guiding them and for our students being able to reach and handle things in a mature and thoughtful way, and they do. And I would also just point out that there are lots and lots of studies that unless a child is living in some kind of little protective bubble cocoon somewhere, they are exposed indiscriminately to thousands and thousands of acts of violence by third grade, simply by being exposed to television and other forms of media. That happens and we have no control over it. So to have that, you know, the same concept, but done in a thoughtful, thought-provoking, critical thinking way, that's the way I would like my child to experience the reality of loss, not through, watching a movie or a show and never being able to talk about it. So this is why this night is extremely important. One, to understand the process, but two, in case, and I promise you, if you Google any sensitive topic or any curriculum, somewhere in this country, you're going to find outrage about something, because we live in a time of outrage. And I want you to keep in mind that the people who are working with this and who we trust and who are working with the students are not experiencing that. It's not, nothing that is in this content is outrageous or it's just not. It's appropriate, and they handle it in a really skillful way, in a way that's a learning experience. So if somebody does pop up next year who has not read it yet, or who has not listened to their child, or just is gonna go with the headline. It's really important for the school committee to understand the care and the thought and the selection behind that knee-jerk reaction to something. And if we need to come back next year and share some of the previews of things, but I think that one of the takeaways is, let's not anticipate, horrible things and horrible reactions happening. Let's actually do the work and experience it and learn from that. And that's what part of this year was about, and that's what next year will be about as well too. But we're not seeing that, and we need to hold firm in our convictions that this is appropriate, it's developmentally appropriate, and it's the right thing to do, and we're gonna do it really well.
Yeah, just a couple of quick comments. One, Knowledge Gap, most important book I've read in 10 years, no, hands down. Unbelievable book. The work, this work is so important to not only to me, but to students, obviously, that I just can't emphasize enough how impressed I am with the fact that it's beginning to take roots. And the proof's gonna be in the pudding 5 years down the line, when we look at O'Malley and say, boy, that transferred from the elementary schools into O'Malley, there's no question about it. I do think, and I'm not a big believer in silver bullets, like this isn't the silver bullet. I think that it's great to see teachers excited about teaching this type of stuff, and that really excites me. But I'm also a little bit concerned about two things. One that was addressed at the very end, which I wrote down, is who's coaching the coaches? It's an old adage of, who's training the trainers or who's coaching the coaches, and does that get kind of messed up in the process? And it sounds like, I think taking it relatively piecemeal is probably a good idea. And the other thing is that I think it's really important that parents buy in and that we allow that portal to be open to them to see that. And I say that because I think one of the committees I'm on is talking about absenteeism and the importance of that and how that kind of ties in. I mean, if kids are excited about learning, they're going to want to be in school. And so that type of thing. The only thing that really concerns me is what about the kids that have, that are getting extended services, and are they falling behind? What does that kind of play out to look like?
So that's
Is
one
that-
of the shifts for sure is the classroom setup will definitely change. And I think that we're working on that. But you can speak from your personal experiences this year.
So we've had to rethink our special education service delivery time, just because prior to this, when we were doing Reading Street, we were doing more of a center-based, where students would rotate through different activities, and so they very easily could rotate out to receive special education services. Where this is much more whole group, it's a little bit harder, so that is one of the considerations, and something that Greg mentioned in terms of scheduling, is we've played around a lot with what is the best time within that block for students to receive those services, so that they're not missing any part of the valuable learning within the class, and how do they then come back and catch up with what they've missed. And that's something that I think we'll continue to work on next year, in that we're having those conversations at our building. We've talked about having WIN time, which stands for what I need. So there would be a block of time every day where students would specifically get those targeted services or interventions that would be identified in things like the DeVos testing and some of our other assessments. And then something that it was on the slides, but I don't think we specifically stated, is that K-3 will be doing foundations, phonics instruction. So that's meant to be couples with Wit and Wisdom. And K-2 has leveled readers as part of that as well, that are decodable. I'm sorry, they're not levels, they're decodable. So they go along with the content, but are easy for students to decode. So that would also be a careful consideration at that time. But that is one of the bigger fish we still have to fry and figure out how do we best schedule those times. They're still getting it. It's just how do we fit it into our day
But I think one of the key pieces is what you just talked about. They're still going to be receiving the same text, even in those controlled texts. And with one group of students, you can really focus on still the decoding piece of, what does this word say? Where the other students will be focusing on the deeper content. So you have the best of both with that same book. And that was a missing piece with our skills instruction in the past. We didn't have enough text to necessarily connect with the skills instruction as well as teaching them something new.
I appreciate all the stuff we talked about tonight. It's so important. And I'd like to go back with myself. I could have made a student of myself. Thanks very much.
So these books, the literature, the texts, fiction, nonfiction, is this how are these selections made? I think, I mean, is that part of the curriculum?
It's part of the curriculum.
So they're predetermined through the,
Great minds is the,
Yeah.
publisher.
okay, and, some of these subject matters are difficult conversations. I know like Little Red Riding Hood is also like, grim book. Three Little Pigs, but, I mean, there's sort of like, the same kind of scenario where you teach kids young about like, horrible things that can happen but, I don't know, you mentioned something about one student having, an uncomfortable situation. I know Greg said that there hasn't been any problems, no problems with teachers, not teachers, sorry.
With parents.
Yeah, parents.
Good.
But I'd like to know more about like how that, like there are difficult topics, right? And maybe some things are, best left to the parents to discuss. So where, like,
Well,
see.
she brought it up a few times already. She's a very strong-willed young lady, and I just had a parent conference with her mom yesterday. That's one of the things that I love most about her. But what happened was she got a hold of the boys' war and started looking through it, and then she started taking notes, and she's one of the students that ended up with 4 pages of notes.
Yeah.
And then she quickly realized that both the North and the South actually had some decent reasons for going to war. And it wasn't necessarily because the South wanted to have slaves. It's because they kind of needed to have slaves in order to live the lives that they were living. And the North had it in a different way. So she kind of started to feel that out for herself and started to really understand like why it wasn't necessarily that we were painting white people as bad people, that, that there was an awful lot going on.
Yeah, there are some people who are bad that happen to be white, but, so that was 5th grade, or?
Yes.
I was assuming? Yeah. And, my other question was about, so you're saying there's going to be a staggered approach next year. So 2nd grade in West Parish and 4th grade in West Parish. Huh?
Yes.
And so so those 2nd graders that had that curriculum.
Yeah.
Are going into 3rd grade and will have the other curriculum.
Correct.
So.
So some of them, yeah. And we looked at it as like, they're already ahead of the game and that they learned all of this knowledge through this other program as well. Yes, it doesn't follow the same vertical trajectory
Yeah.
as being in the one program. But it wasn't a loss for those students at all. I mean, those teachers from CKLA will say the same thing, like, oh my goodness, they learned so much within that program. Yes, a little different topics, and maybe not even quite as in-depth through CKLA, but still have gained knowledge.
Yeah, so you don't perceive a problem with that for the students that will have to like go back and forth and back again?
No, I don't.
No, because the
They're pretty
foundational
flexible,
skills,
yeah.
we're only
They're
really
there.
talking about
The
this
knowledge
piece
piece,
of the
yeah.
program, but some of it is a continuation with the foundational skills. That would be a complete vertical
So there's some
alignment.
overlap.
Yes,
Yeah.
there's some overlap.
And listen, I'm a financial impatient person, and that's tempered with the, concern of doing this poorly. Many folks have done this sort of poorly. And the cost to that on students and teachers is just something that we can't abide. Yeah, this is what you touched on some, but especially towards the end, for as enthusiastic as you guys are, and I share that enthusiasm, there wasn't too much enthusiasm in September, October, November. there was, and these are, these are talented, skilled, better teachers, okay? And they were really struggling with, how do I teach this way? It's a big, big lift. I can't say that enough. And we can't underestimate that. We need to respect that, acknowledge it, and then prepare as we are doing to support our teachers, and then allow and also provide the opportunities for them to support each other. That's the most powerful support. And if we rush through it, that can't happen. And we can't put it in place, whether it's a parent communication or the resource or the binder you're talking about, without taking the time to have our literacy leaders, our coaches, support from the district do that well, it will not go well. And the cost there is too deep, very honestly.
I can see a scenario where like this is more like the pyramid, they're kind of figuring things out and fine tuning so that it isn't everybody getting the whole learning the kinks at the same time. They can streamline and kind of focus on what's important to the next person to learn so that they're not making the same mistakes or dealing with the same.
I think that's really parcel.
That's our goal. I mean, that's our.
Pacing seems like a little thing. It's such a big thing. It can be the success or the death of a program, right? So trying to work out some of those kinks before it's a full rollout is really critical too. And again, it's about making sure we don't lose all of the other great stuff. So it's that delicate balance of implementing something new, but keeping all the greatness that we already had. And if we jump in too quickly, teachers being teachers wanting to do it all well, something ends up in the mess. So we want to be sure we're careful in that process.
We want them to feel as effective as possible as teachers, right? And so the feeling of ineffectiveness is no greater than getting handed something and saying, teach this, and without having the
And not-
time
not-
to learn
Not
it.
to prolong your very long day already. But what was I gonna say? What I was gonna say, but you had said something that kind of piqued me with some experience we've had where you got to do it the right way, otherwise everything you do from then on is just not right. It's counterproductive, what you do.
Absolutely.
Can I add to that too? So this is exciting to us to hear that there's excitement in the classroom, right? That this is what we do, this is why we're sitting here. I really hope, and I know it will happen, that the lines of communication stay open so that if you find any needs, that it can be brought to the school committee to help facilitate this going forward, because it seems like we're on a really good path. And I don't want it to feel like there's boundaries other than what we're doing, just to keep it going throughout the rest of the grades. This is
Thank you,
exciting.
we appreciate
So
that.
I mean, I don't know what we can do. I mean, we're here, we do budget, we do policy and programming and things like that, but whatever we can do to help facilitate.
Well, one of the things that the school committee has done is by building the infrastructure of support. You
The physicians and
you have
stuff.
math and literacy
Yeah.
coaches that we didn't have 10 years
Best
ago.
things we ever did.
And that's a budgetary, huge piece of support that is paying dividends every single day. So, we find ourselves with actually an incredible infrastructure compared to most districts, which is why we hear people making selections in 2 weeks or somebody else telling them what they're going to do. And I guarantee you that those districts, not only some of them, it will be a single person or two who picks something like Wit and Wisdom, and they'll start in September, the entire district, and they'll be going, oh my gosh, what happened? But you have supported and funded a really thoughtful growth in that kind of support and these practices. So that's why we find ourselves able to do this.
I had a teacher share today. I have not been this excited to teach in 20 years. So, and the hardest year to teach in 20 years. And exactly. So I was going to say, so add that to the year it's been, right?
Yeah.
So we're doing something right.
So it is 9:35.
And we appreciate you giving us all of this time.
Thank
because,
you.
Thank you.
These are our most exciting parts of our meeting.
Thank you. Thank you, Liz.
Next year. The leveling out, yeah, it's the, I don't know what the space goes in.
No, Anne Marie.
Did they?
I forgot to ask. Shannon.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And our next agenda item. Next item on the agenda is superintendent's report.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
COVID-19 recap, 2019.
That's why I think.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's interesting.
It was discovered.
Like, do they call the flu?
I don't know. Okay, all right. Carry on.
Yes, very on, please.
Code update. So after an uptick, a little bit of an uptick rather, in March, the wastewater concentration is going down again, which I always like. At the same time, though, we have had an uptick. So you see the sort of roller coaster here we're having in terms of identified cases. Back to 35, spread across the district quite well. Higher concentration at Gloucester, O'Malley, but quite low at our elementaries. I don't know. I'm not gonna make a good conclusion from this. I think we're gonna see these ups and downs. You know, I don't know. I mean, not that I'm a health professional, but that's probably likely. But we'll continue to track everything, and as we're doing, so what we do know of these 35 cases, and talking to Jeff Parker today and him working with the school nurses and principals, is that we don't see any patterns within the schools here. There's nothing identified connecting these cases. We've had that a couple times, as we talked about, but that's not happening here. So there's some increase here, but not. And then here, as I always show you, the ups and downs we've had across the year. 35 cases is comparable to, well, just really a month ago. In March, we were at a similar level. And then that goes back then to sort of November. So these are some data on the testing. So you saw the first three groups here: 328, 44, and 411. Obviously, we had vacation last week, and then you see 1,009 folks who tested in pool testing this week. 1,743 tests were distributed. I'm sorry, we just don't have the results on the complete results on the pools for this week. But positives through the at-home testing were 9. The weekly totals of individuals for this week, okay, are at-home testing. You see, I'm just broken out by, it's the same numbers above in terms of who tested, how many people tested this week, but just broken up by staff and students. So you see 433 staff participated in the at-home testing this week, 1,310 students for a total of 743. And then in terms of pool testing, 222 staff members, 787 students, to a total of 1,009, meaning we administered 2,750 tests this week. Following up on requests from Laura, here's unique individuals in terms of who are doing the test, who are registered for testing. It varies week to week whether folks participate, okay? So in terms of unique staff, 578 total staff are involved in testing in one way or another. 271 unique students are involved in testing one way or another. And you see how it's broken down at home only, 1,003 people that are just doing it at home. They're not doing pooled. The pool testing or weekly testing, 722 are only doing that, not the other. And then 924 are registered for both. So the total of 2649 registrations. I guess that's 2649 unique registrations. Okay. Broken out as you can see. You can pause there, see if there are any questions.
Just
Yeah.
a happy question. Why looked like there was quite a substantial rise in the pool testing number of students.
We don't know, honestly. I mean, because part of this is, especially at a high school is, our testers go to the room, they call all the students who are registered in that room, in that classroom. And then the students literally choose whether to come out or not.
I see.
Yeah.
So maybe after
So, especially at the
vacation,
high school,
maybe after vacation, more people wanted to test.
it could be, yeah, it could be also absence are lower, yeah. So, but that's the variation we see in pool testing, part of the variation, I should say, is just that, students can choose to opt out that week.
Can the younger students also opt out?
It's not about, it's more about the older students have more agency.
Well, that's what I,
That's what it is.
that's what I mean, yeah,
Younger students, you say you call it A, they come out.
right.
That's the way, that's how humans work.
Right.
Yeah, that's the look at that.
Thank you.
Can you go to
Oh, sorry.
slide, I just want to see.
This one?
Unique, yeah, okay, yeah, okay. Just my page shot.
Got carried. Moving on, so moving on. Okay, so my goal evaluation process, I shared with everyone tonight, but also especially new members, the goals that the school committee and I agreed upon for this school year. This is the summary of those goals, just to point them out to you. The real update here is the evaluation process, the timeline. Very similar to last year's in terms of timing. The week of May 9th, I will get you evidence, really, the documentation supporting the progress that I made on my goals. That'll be in a Google Drive folder and be organized by the 5 goals, 5 goal areas. Folks, you'll have time in May to review all of that evidence and then evaluation to share with you. Probably we'll go over that, but maybe Kathy and I will talk about how to help the members just understand how to use that essentially. Or it's pretty self-explanatory, but definitely heard from Laura and Sam last year that there's a little flying blind, and so I'd like to support you better than that. School committee submits your individual evaluations to the chair by May 25th. We'll check in at the May 20th school committee meeting to see if you have any updates or discussions about the progress or the process, I should say, really how to do it. By June 3rd, the chair completes a written report and distributes it to the school committee. That's sort of a combination report. And then June 8th, we'll review that publicly.
So I'm just thinking about this process and how we changed the date and everything. Because it used to be, we did the superintendent's evaluation in December.
Yes.
So there was a full year. We have new members that have never done this before. I've been on the committee for 5 months. So I'm wondering if we want to have any kind of discussion or waiver of some sort, that if the newer members that have been here for 5 months don't feel comfortable that they've observed enough to complete evaluation, that they wouldn't be expected to. I mean, there's some communities, when they have this date, they waive the new members' first year for participating in the evaluation if they want to, not that they have to, but just when you see the evaluation and if it calls for information that you may not feel you can't accurately respond to, I wouldn't want to potentially cause any concern.
Yeah.
Because haven't had that full term ability to evaluate. I'm just putting that out there because I know other school committees discuss this as well.
Essentially talking about me and Bill, I guess.
Well, you're the 2 new members, so I mean, it could be any new members.
Like
Like you said, he heard from
I've
Sam and
never-
Laura last year.
Yeah, I've never seen the evaluation. I'd be willing to look at it if there's certain sections that I don't feel confident filling out. Can I just waive those?
You probably should do all or nothing.
All or
Yeah.
nothing, yeah. And when you see it, it's not
It's
like
not
any
simple.
evaluation you've done before.
It's not.
So it's not as simple as just writing great things based on what you knew in the first 5 months.
But that's okay with me though.
I know. But it could work against you too, and that's why I'm saying, a lot of school committees, will have them, unless you participated in 1 full year of working with the superintendent, then you don't necessarily participate in the evaluation. So I just want to put that on the table, just in case it's a concern to anybody. Just leaving it at that.
And we'll also look at the Massachusetts Association of School Committee website, because I do know that they put out a lot of information information on important topics, and this is definitely something at the conference, they usually have a session on this for newer members because
We're both registered on the same day. I forget what grade that is, but.
For charting the board.
Yeah.
for charting the course, but that
This is
would,
different.
you know, this is, would be on top of that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is, the website will give you more information and a small focus.
So I think that's a valid point, so if you get into once you see what it's all about, if there's a concern that you're not as
That's fair.
informed or
Yeah.
express. Don't make it clear.
So what would our options be at this point? Like say, okay, can we see the evaluation, decide whether we feel confident filling it out? Or should we just?
Well, the you can see the evaluation form, like,
Yeah.
sure.
One way we could, because this is, you know, on May 25th, and that, by now and then, obviously, you'll not only see the evidence, but you'll also see the form and the prop and the rubric. You could decide then, I mean, the community could decide then at that point.
Yeah.
Like,
I just wanted to put it out there, especially what Kathy said, it's an all or nothing type thing. I wouldn't want to see trying to figure out part of it and not the other, because that won't work for the compiled composite at the end. But just, I mean, there's no requirement that each member has to do it. But I just wanted members, if they felt overwhelmed or uncomfortable, to know that it's okay, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Right, because there's criteria like, or there's categories of proficient, exemplary, you know, needs improvement or whatever the categories are. So you might have enough information maybe to comment on certain things, but you may feel uncomfortable putting a box in that. So,
And the superintendent's extremely active, so you know him, I know it's only been 5 months, but I think you have a pretty good idea who he is, where some superintendents aren't so engaged. But I just wanted to put that up.
Got no immediate complaints for the record.
Appreciate that. All right, so, yeah, so anyway, there's, you have that also, I gave you a printout copy of this so you can refer to it. And then the last piece is upcoming school committee meetings, and sharing this with you for a reason, looking at 9:48 right now. Like often our meetings are full, but especially at the end of the year, they get quite full because we're trying to do regular work and then also trying to wrap up a number of things, school improvement plans being, you know, primary one, my evaluation being another one. So these are pretty full dates, meetings, okay? And then the subcommittee meetings as well. Just want to make sure folks are aware of that.
I will also let you know that I have touched base with everyone, and if it's you expressed an interest of having our meetings begin earlier. And as our presentation tonight was extremely informative and exciting and everything, we want to make sure we're doing things well for both you and us. You know, we don't want to be going too late to the night for all of our work support, but you know, when you have other people here at the meeting. So people are okay through the end of the school year to meet at 6, if that is agreeable to.
I think the idea that it could be 8:49 right now, it's at 9:49. That'd be actually, it's a big help to, I think, our staff, you know, staff who are our guests at the meetings, or who are presenters at the meeting, I should say, partners and sort of thing. And I think that's a reasonable approach. And then if we need the executive session, it would start at 6, so it wouldn't start earlier than that. I appreciate that, but I think it's a big help to folks. So that, and then this is just upcoming programs, upcoming subcommittee and agendas where we have, or topics, I should say, where we have it. Next order of business is to give a summary of the presentation that was provided on the building. So I'll do that now.
Yes, and I just want to, like, yeah, and we want, I mean, the presentation is in our packet.
On Zoom.
It's on Zoom, so it's in last meeting's recording. Probably began around 45-minute mark of our regular meeting. There was no real discussion about the project, just questions that kind of clarified. So it really was a report on the project, not a decision. There were no decisions made and no votes made. And I did check with our attorney, who then checked with the Attorney General on how to kind of cure the fact that we had an administrative error on our agenda, and we have complied and satisfied from the Attorney General's perspective. So.
Great, so I'll go through this pretty quickly, as you said.
Yeah, you don't have to hit every slide.
What's that?
You don't have to hit every slide.
No, I won't. I might flip through every slide, but I won't talk.
Okay.
So just a few things here, and also the presentation, the slides have been up since that day. They're on the building project website, very easy to find. One of the most important things to talk about was schedule. No, actually, I'm gonna cut to this. I'm gonna cut to the summary here. The most important piece is sort of the big picture here, that the project is on schedule. Project continues to remain on budget. And within the assigned budget of $66.7 million, progress is continuing, steel work continues. I'll show you a little bit about those pieces. Dealing that all goes according to plan, despite the significant industry issues, unprecedented price increases, material availability, lead times. The project team, we'll talk about in a moment, is doing a tremendous job of coordinating all of that. And in order for the project to remain on schedule and on budget. I can't, it's hard for me, I'm not doing a great job communicating the challenge that they're facing. I think you'll know to some degree what the industry's experiencing, but it's a remarkable task we're doing right now. Just go to a few other things here. In terms of I want to talk about the project team here. This is probably the best representation we've seen through the whole project of what the different roles are of the project team. So the owner's project manager, they're hired and work for us, and they're really, project managing. They're dealing with the meetings. They're doing all the interfacing with MSBA. They're putting together all the materials and submittals to MSBA. They are really overseeing work with the other project team members, overseeing the budget, payment, review, and approvals. And they organize the building committee so we can make decisions in order to keep the process going. The architect and designer, for most folks, that is pretty clear what their role is, but it's particularly now putting all the pieces in place. So we're getting materials on time and ordering on time and working with the contractor and all the suppliers, as well as the subcontractors. Construction manager, the folks who are building the building. That's W.T. Rich, sorry. The owner project manager is CBRE Heery. Architect and designers Doran Whittier. Construction manager W.T. Rich. They are working through all. They've worked with all the bidding. They've worked with all the work. We've worked with all subcontractor procurement, all the construction coordination, and essentially building the building. All of that plus our team equals some really great project outcomes so far. I want to go to timeline here for a little bit, just so people see what's happening, where we are. So site work began in August. Foundations were poured and installed in November, December, and January. They managed the weather quite well. Their steel has been putting up, and I think probably just about complete right now. If you go by the building, you see that both the A and B building, or the A and B sections of the school, are pretty much complete. They've been pouring the concrete slabs that are on each level. They've done, I think, 2 extended days of those. They have at least 2 floors of that completed. And then soon we'll be starting to see them doing the framing and the roofing and the work to enclose the building and make it weatherproof. And then at that point, they can get involved in the interior work. So that's the sort of schedule. Let me just go to, I'll talk about pictures in a moment. A lot of community outreach that the project team is doing, particularly CBRE Heery. weekly project updates that are on the website every week, email with that, ever, if there are any changes to things or sort of noteworthy things happening on site, large deliveries, the late night, the later day concrete pours. That's updated on the website, but also email notification and flyer notification to the neighborhood. Dennis Pasidi is the on-site owner's representative, and he's always there available, and he has contact information on the website. So if there are neighbors or folks in the neighborhood who have questions or concerns, they can reach him, and he's been very responsive and very helpful for a number of our neighbors. This is just a sort of reporting on some of the very significant increases in terms of costs. While we were meeting last week, the project team was doing a great job of explaining how awful, ridiculous the cost increases are. And then we had to have them remind folks that even despite these, we're managing the budget in a way where it not only is on budget, but because of the way they've been doing the bidding and how our prices are contracted and locked in, that despite these increases in cost, that doesn't mean that we face additional cost increases. Essentially the guaranteed maximum price is already built into all the bids, and so we're on the reasons we would go over cost at this point would not be because of conditions in the field or cost increases. It'd be whether we were making decisions to make change orders, that sort of stuff. That's something we obviously can't control, will control. And then the most important piece I want folks to show is just the design update. So just quickly, folks, remember this is the building. The what we call the A building is the academic wing. 6 classrooms per floor, 3 floors. What we call the B building are the larger spaces, cafeteria, gymnasium, and administrative offices. And also the back of the house, which is all the operational and facilities. You have the large playground in the back for grades 1 through 5. The smaller playground for K and 1 in the front. You have the bus loop here, and then the parking and also the arrival and dismissal loop here as well. So A, B, and then just give you an update. Whatever, I already said that. These are some of the designs we're seeing on the playground, and we're working with the interior group this week to really refine the playgrounds. Just more photos from here, or not photos, but drawings. And, there have been some adjustments in interior work because of not only value engineering, but also change of materials. Those are ongoing and will continue to happen. Some adjustments and just show some of the looks. Colors have been discontinued, so we have to make some adjustments in colors, but that's all work in progress. I want to get to just the updates of the construction. We have pictures of the steel and everything, but I guess we don't. Sorry about that. So the last piece is just in terms of timing. So this is what we see in the next immediate is pouring the concrete slabs. I mentioned install roofing, build exterior facade, and then at that point it's weatherproof in May and June, and we start working on the interior framing and get to the interior. So quick summary of the presentation last week. I thought it was very helpful to have a full team here for the first time in a while. They gave us a lot of great information, which is obviously on recording, and folks can watch that because they did a better job than I did right now.
Excellent job. We will move on to subcommittee reports, and there was one subcommittee meeting of the Building and Finance Subcommittee on April 14th.
I'm gonna be very quick. This is all on Zoom. I'm just checking the packet right now. I want to make sure. I think we just did one motion out of it, which was the So we met on April 14th, and there was a couple topics of discussion. One was the community eligibility program, which is our food service program. The school district has to make a decision by June 1st, I believe it is. Gary, correct me if
Yes.
I'm wrong, should I be expert
Yes.
on this? Of whether we're gonna participate in this program. We talked about which schools currently right now would be eligible for as far as low income, and I think it's the 40% threshold that each school would have to make. And I believe most of our schools make that threshold with the exception of Plum Cove and West Parish. And please correct me if I'm wrong.
Right.
This meeting happened a couple weeks ago.
East Gloucester too.
East Gloucester as well, okay.
They do not.
Okay, my notes just said the two, okay. Maybe I'm reading something else, but anyway, at the same time as we're trying to make this decision, Martha Joe let us know that the House Ways and Means has a proposal before them to try to attempt to do free lunch for all coming next year, and we won't know that decision. We're hoping to know that decision before the June 1st deadline, and I think that's probably the goal of the state, to try to have that decision available so that we don't have to make our June 1st decision, if that makes sense. So in addition to talking about the school program, the school lunch program, we talked about the capital projects. A lot of it you've heard tonight when we discussed with Mike Hale, so there wasn't anything new. One topic we did discuss was the preschool. You brought that up earlier, Laura. We talked about, because we're gonna have to be making a decision at some point in the near future of whether we're gonna move forward with asking the city to purchase the building, or if we're gonna choose to do another space. So Anne Marie Jordan was online with us and she spoke to us. She said that Durham Whittier worked with the faculty at the building and we also got some staff input regarding what the staff's thoughts were on that building. It was pretty positive. The areas that were positive was the space, the amount of space, the clean space, the size, the parking. Things that they'd want to do better would be to have dedicated spaces for certain educational purposes. Fewer short spaces. I can't read my own writing. I'm sorry, my eyes are exhausted. Small learning spaces, a playground with accessibility with better equipment, lighting, better carpets, more custodial staff, and more storage for their items and for teachers and therapists to store stuff as well. If it was going to be a new space, they'd want plenty of bathrooms, child size, appropriate bathrooms, larger playgrounds, confidential spaces, natural light. That would be the wish list if we were to build a new space. So obviously no decision has been made at this point, but the superintendent's been doing a great job working with Gary to get the information that we'll need to make that decision, and also get the staff's voice involved as well. So when the time comes, we'll have an idea of what will be not necessarily the best decision, but the most accepted financial decision on how we're going to move forward with the preschool. We got an update on our fiscal 2022 budget, and Gary, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're under budget by $148,811 this year, which is great. And then finally, we did review the transfers. The transfers, you can see the information in our packet. There was a motion that came forward that we recommend to the full committee to approve those transfers, and we did. So I so moved that motion now for the committee as a whole to vote those those transfers.
Are you moving it now?
I'm making the
They're
motion.
not on our consent.
Were they? Sorry.
Yeah, I thought I saw that.
Okay.
It's,
I didn't know that. Okay, great, we already did it, so I don't have to move it, I withdraw my motion.
Awesome.
Any questions?
Just one, when are we, I don't remember when it's on our schedule to make a decision about that building.
If we have one more year, full year, and the lease agreement has a timeline in it, because we have the ability to purchase it. We have to give the city notice if we're not going to, so that is driven by the lease agreement, which I believe we have one more year.
So just with 2 more years in the lease after August, 2 more years, but we have the option to buy ends late next spring.
Right, so, and I know you were in a process of collecting information.
Yeah, we still have, and one of the next steps is starting, so we have essentially what we need in terms of space now. We're finding out some. The next step will be to start working with the city on just discussing them about, you know, are there some, is there, you know, if the city is looking for additional space as well, I can work with them together on that. That's probably that's one of the next steps.
Okay.
And also, you know, and then at the same time, look at some space utilization, take a closer look at the study that was done. It's about 3 years ago, I believe. And so those are two immediate next steps, basically.
I can't help but wonder though, I mean, because it is a year from now, that's why I say the year, I know it's a 2-year lease. But I really think we should, some representation should be speaking with administration at some point to find out what the thought process is on, from the administration side, the city administration
city,
side,
yeah.
city administrations, because if they do decide that this isn't the correct path to go on, and we haven't even decided this is the correct path to go on, what is the alternative and what time do we have knowing the lease expires in 2 years? You know, if we choose, if the decision is not to go forward with this space, can another space be built out in 2 years?
Yeah, no, right, no.
So
yeah.
even though we
Yeah.
essentially have a year to make the decision, we really need to start.
The original
Zoning down that
timeline,
interest.
so the original timeline that I proposed, that we were aiming for was to decide, you know, this, you know, before the end of the school year.
Right.
Can't do that at this point.
Right.
But need to very early next school year.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but that's, so we're aiming for that now.
Thank you for your report. Okay, we have one item of action. It's an acceptance of a grant from Gloucester Education Foundation in the amount of $200 to pay for the bus for the senior art field trip to the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in May 2022.
So moved.
Second. Discussion.
Thank you, Gloucester Education.
Okay. Okay, Laura?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Me? Yes. Melissa?
Yes.
And
Yes.
okay. Motion carries 5-0. Okay.
Things.
Okay. Anybody want to say anything under discussion of new business? Apparently you do.
Just two things. One, because it may be a subcommittee referral. So as I laid out in our, you know, in the sort of the big rocks with accomplishments here, one of them is in advance of the new school being completed, by this fall, we have to make an update to the school assignment, to the school zones, school assignment zones. And so we're doing that work now. I would like to bring to the committee, or at least first maybe subcommittee, just sort of the criteria we want to be using, and also some of the stuff we're learning about it. So in terms of updating the school zones, what's the first place? Imagine it comes directly to the school committee at the full school committee, or is it appropriate for one of the subcommittees to look at that first? Following?
I didn't.
So in terms of we have to update the school zones.
Zones, you mean the,
Assignment zones, where people live and what
yeah,
what
the,
school
what
they're
is it
assigned to.
called? District.
Yeah.
Catchment.
Catchment
Catchment.
area,
Catchment, thank you.
sorry.
And so we got to update the catchment areas in advance of the new school opening.
Okay.
We need that resolved, and we're on a timeline with the work we're doing to have that, you know, solved in the beginning of next school year, so people know all in advance, okay? We've been doing work on it. I want to give the committee or a subcommittee an update on that. Also, you know, just sort of get some input on the process from you. Is that a subcommittee? Is it a full committee? I don't have a preference. I'm just looking to.
Seems like it would be full committee. I mean, doesn't really fall under this.
Well, I mean, we have enough committees, we can, I mean, there's, as far as the exact title of the subcommittee, we would just find a way to cover everything. But I would say, is there work to be done on it? Is it more informational and you just need feedback?
It's informational and sort of, you know, one of the things I turn to the committee for is very helpful is, you know, what are we missing here?
Yeah.
You know, that sort of thing. That's, you know, what have we not considered? What should we still consider? That sort of thing. So it's an update on where we are. It's not, and it's, and the process we're doing and the criteria we're going to be using as we, you know, consider it. And then the question to the committee is, you know, what are we missing here, which we consider that we're not? That's right.
So I would say it's probably presented to the full committee, and if we identify issues, then it can be referred to subcommittee if there's work to be done. That's how I would recommend
The only
it.
Yeah.
That
my
way
only
it's not
question is,
duplicitous.
so looking at this list of what's on our agenda for the next meetings, realistically, I mean, just realistically,
This could be August. You want August? You
well, it
want,
can't be August if it's,
How about if you and I work out that
okay.
when, but I hear that the bringing in full school committee, it's right place.
Unless you think subcommittee's quicker, I mean, I'm not trying to,
No, I think
Push out more time.
it feels like a full committee, I'm just looking really sort of specifically at what's.
Yeah, we need to work it out. We can work something, we can figure it out.
Okay.
Okay, great, that's very helpful. And then the last piece, just a heads up, for next school committee meeting, we're gonna be giving to you and therefore, everybody, just a schedule of all the sort of year-end events, celebrations, things.
Award nights.
They're happening, through all the schools, basically. Just so folks can see what the breadth of it is, first of all, which is, great, very, celebratory, obviously, in many ways. And then also, just so you have a sense of what everything's going on. So,
Great.
And just wanted to, that's coming your way.
It's a super busy time.
Join me in being a parent of a senior.
Yeah,
It's a
you-
really busy time.
Right. So, that's all.
All right. See nothing else. Say, we have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Laura?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Kathy? Yes. Melissa?
no.
Just kidding.
Yes,
Bob
I
would
think you're outvoted.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. Very great topic, Greg. Thank you.